Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 350, part 2. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be discussing the second of our two-part epic look at Batman Year One. And what we're doing is we're going through this, we're comparing, when it's appropriate, the scenes that stuck out for us between the animated feature and the original comic work, and comparing which one we like better, or you know, if we like both of them, explaining why, what was it that they brought to the table. Because the animated feature, while it's very close, there's some distinct differences between the two at certain points, and it's fun to really have a discussion about that. So, hope you guys enjoy this one. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, they have this Batman Court of Owls book and mask set at a special discount. It's 50% off. It's regularly $24.99, 50% off, only $12.49. Listen to this. It's that best-selling epic that introduced Gotham City's Court of Owls, you know, the trade paperback collecting Batman 1 through 7. But it also includes the PVC owl mask with a white elastic band that created the sensation at the comics conventions in 2012. I don't have this, and I've seen pictures of this owl mask online. I wasn't aware that it was a PVC mask, but it's something that, like, I want. I mean, like, I'm definitely going to grab this because I'm into in my office, like, having, like, displays up that are comic book related. And I've found that besides having, like, signed comics and posters and stuff like that, I'm finding that I really like these kind of trendy little cool, because they show it in the picture on DCB Service's site, like on a stand, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that would look really cool in my room here, you know. And it's kind of a cool conversation piece. Like if somebody were in here and they're like a casual Batman fan or a casual comics fan, they might not be aware of it, and I just think it would be like a cool thing to start a discussion about the whole Court of Owls storyline. And I'm insanely into that these days, because usually people that I would bring up to our office here where Jim and I have recorded in the past, actually we do more over Skype these days, but when we've recorded in here in the past, you know, friends of mine that I bring up here are usually fans, at least casually, of comics, and it's a great way to have those kind of discussions. And for me, I just geek out at seeing that kind of stuff too. I'm a Bat fan, and so I'm in on that one. But that's DCBService.com, and be sure to check them out for your comic book pre-order needs. They are a Comixology and iVerse Media digital partner. Please do all of your digital purchasing right through their website. Doesn't cost you anything more. It helps our show sponsor, but also earns you 5% of those purchases towards a DCB Service order. So you're actually building up credit that you can use to spend and save from shopping at DCB Service, and they're already amazing discounts. Over at InStockTrades.com, they run these all the time, these amazing specials, and they have this New Year's Resolution #1 special that's running right now. It's 45% off sale for DC Comics. There are so many DC Comics trades that are at least 45% off if you head on over to the website. InStockTrades.com is your collected edition source. Head over there and make sure to check out the amazing deals. And for those of you that collect archive editions, they keep running these archive edition sales at 50% off. These are hardcover volumes, and a lot of times if you're looking to get caught up on those things, 50% off ends up making the decision between being able to buy them or not, or grabbing two of them, because you're basically getting them, you know, 2 for 1, which is great. But here's an amazing example. They have that Batman Incorporated hardcover volume 1. It's 50% off, only $12.49. You know, this is a hardcover volume at like less than $13. Remember, orders are $50 or more give you free shipping, and please consider helping out a show sponsor, because they sponsor so many podcasts, and it really, without sites like DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com helping podcasts, they a lot of times keep us going, and they pay for our costs to continue podcasting. So I want to make sure that I want to shout them out and thank them for their support. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the Atom.
Actually, Jim, as we go to jump into issue 406, you were doing like this crazy, insane intro for it. What was it? June 6th? What is it?
Well, the date is it's June 6th, Chapter 3, Black Dawn.
You sound like a voiceover person when you're doing that. It's funny how reading this again this way, I don't know, I think I've seen the animated feature so many times that I don't remember there being a cut in this. Even though I've read the series again a couple of times in preparation for this episode, it's for some reason this is shocking to me that was that cliffhanger, wondering what was going to happen with Batman. I really liked how this particular issue played out with that whole scene. There's something about the pacing of seeing Batman falling through this in the comic, knowing that his utility belt's broken down, knowing that he's green in this one, because we got to see that so early on in the beginning that, yes, he's got his skills. He's been training for years. He can kick down trees, which I know you love. He can do all these great things, but he doesn't feel ready. Even his first time out in the Cape, where he's getting hit with a television set, is something that for him is showing just, I'm not ready yet. I'm not in the place. And for us as Batman fans, it's a really interesting thing to read now, to see him in this younger era where he's not the confident guy. That we know there's unspoken things nowadays that, like, Batman knows more than we do. On this one, I'm pretty sure we know everything that's going on with him. Like, there's nothing hidden there. Which is an interesting place to be in with him on this journey, as everything's going on.
Oh, God, yeah. You're seeing the early Bat who's got to scramble, bob and weave, whereas your experienced Batman, you always think, okay, he's planned for this. He's trained for this moment. He already has it in his head how he's going to handle it, how he's going to deal with it. This Batman doesn't have that background, doesn't have that, that planning, doesn't have that strategery down yet.
You just got to get that in.
Just because I know how much it annoys you and others who listen to the show.
I like this whole bit where he's going in that danger 80,000 watts electricity kind of thing. I like how he's saying that this will hopefully provide me with some safety if that is a lie. Like, he's going in there not knowing what's what. And that tells you just how dangerous the situation is, where your best option is to risk 80,000 watts.
I like the fact that it does turn out to be a lie. It does turn out to be a way to keep the people out of where the where the foreman and whatnot would live. They wouldn't want anyone going there. Well, guess what? Slap a big sign that says 80,000 watts, and you're going to keep someone from out of. You're going to keep people out of there. So I liked that the gamble paid off, and that the whole time you knew it was a true gamble. But even he keeps his lockpicks in his gloves. So losing his belt, he didn't use that. And there's other things we're going to see that he's kept hidden, throughout the uniform that, he's down a lot of his arsenal, but he's not completely out.
When we get to that June 7th sequence with Catwoman, I like that we have that continuity of the Siamese and seeing this cat like meowing and how loud it is. I like how there's like an establishment of what you should expect from Siamese cats with everything that's going on in this particular sequence of events. I also like that we don't get, and there's something to me we don't get this explanation like, why does she have all these cats? You just kind of assume that they're strays that she's kind of bonded to and taken care of, but you don't get that explanation. I kind of like that for some reason. I like a little bit of a mystery to Selina, like that not everything's out on the table, and her relationship with Holly is something that, for me, when this kicked that off, and then later on, we get to see Holly brought in to the Catwoman series, being, a cohort and eventually donning the mantle of Catwoman. It's kind of cool to see this early part of their relationship, because I always found their relationship interesting. I like that Selina, who seems like she's kind of alone or able to stand on her own, there's something about her relationship with Holly. She feels protective of her, whether it's, I guess it feels like kind of a little sister relationship. It's proof that everybody needs something. But it also kind of harkens to what Batman, I think, gets from Robin. It's that kind of, that person to play off of, that person to protect, that person who grounds you and keeps you from stepping too far away from the world. A Batman unchecked, and that's something that, Tim Drake noticed in, Lonely Place of Dying, that Batman needs a Robin to kind of tether him. And I think in this, we kind of see a Catwoman, like, what would she be like if Holly wasn't there? I don't know that she'd have that grounding, that tethering that we see from her in this. She gets a lot from Holly. A lot of her motivation comes from protecting and taking care of Holly. I think it's the reason why they make the life-changing choice that they do, and that we've seen in this series. And it's something I like in that relationship, that a lot of that stuff is not expressly written on the page. There are things that as you get to know them as characters, you just kind of feel because of this whole scenario that's presented for you. And there's something about that. I'm a fan of, like, expansive narrative. I like that. I have no problem with that. But I also appreciate the art of knowing when to pull that back and not tell, and just let people get to know the characters enough that they flesh a lot of that out on their own. That's where I think spoon-feeding things, sometimes you lose these opportunities. This book really has a nice balance of telling you what you need to know and letting your head go where it needs to.
Oh, God, yeah. And one of the things that, because you're talking about just seeing the Holly Selena growth and just the origin of it, I think that's, for me, one of my favorite parts of year one is we're getting year one of Bruce, we're getting year one of Batman, but we are getting this origin of all the other characters. We're getting the growth, and just it's an understanding of where they came from. You can't just tell the Batman story. You got to tell all the supporting cast, and I think that's something that this series has really done a wonderful job with, giving equal press time to all parts of the story. Bruce isn't just about Batman. He's not just about Alfred. There's Gordon, there's Selena, there's everything that's going on in Gotham. It's all part of his growth, all part of his origin.
And I like how it's like their origins are tied very heavily, how this agent of change has come into Gotham, and his being there has kind of caused a spiraling effect for all of these people. They all become interconnected because of his changing of Gotham. Selena's whole life has changed because of it. Jim Gordon's life has started to change because of it. Where these are people that you could see a very clear darker path, if he wasn't there. That's something, as the story goes on and we get to see Bruce eventually realizing that he needs a comrade, a confidant, you get to see where that comes from and why nobody can really be alone in Gotham. If you're alone in Gotham, you're done. Everybody needs somebody in Gotham who's got their back and can help get them through those times. And sometimes be the one that provides the motivation to keep moving on. Because I would imagine your loneliest people in Gotham are the ones that are mugged and robbed, and they're done. It's because nobody's there to protect them. Nobody's there to watch their back.
Yeah. And one of the things I love seeing is just Gordon's his change and just his acceptance of Batman. Especially within the sequence here, you really start seeing the birth of it. You really start seeing the growth of where he starts thinking they as opposed to we, as opposed to us. He's looking at the commissioner. He's looking at the other police as completely different than him. And he's looking at Batman at the evidence that's been presented to him, that this guy got hurt protecting some little old lady. This guy has had a building dropped on him, but he's still not killing. This guy is doing all these, where Bruce could have taken the easy route, he never did. And Gordon recognizes that. And I think, again, it's one of the things that you got to love about Jim Gordon, that he is a true cop. He is there for protect and serve. It's not about his glory. It's not about fame. It's not about any of the negative, darker side of it. It is about the truth of, he and Bruce both have that same drive to protect.
I like the whole chimney bit, where like he was coming out of there, because those were some things that weren't in that wasn't in the animated feature, right?
Yeah, it was.
The chimney?
Yeah. When they went down, it pretty much played like this. Because also I enjoyed seeing how the flow through in the animated, where he traps him down there, and he's up there, and then he drops the stuff down on him.
No, but I'm talking about the two guys when he comes out of there and he takes them down. I don't remember that part being in the animated. I remember him going up through the chimney, but I'm talking about like when he comes out and he's almost like Vulcan nerve pinching the other two guys. I don't remember that. I
don't remember that either, to be honest with you. But I'm not talking.
I remember him locking them down. I get that bit, but like I don't remember this part where he's coming out from there, because wasn't he in the animated feature when they came in? He went under the stairs with the Siamese or with the cat. Didn't the cat pop out, and that was how the guy saw him in the animated feature?
Well, he's under there eventually.
Right, but it played out differently. We saw him under there for a longer time, and the guy turned and saw him. Remember when the one guy went down from the stealth bit? That was when they turned down and saw him for the first time, but I don't remember the chimney bit where he put the guy under, where he pulled the two guys in the chimney. I don't remember that being in the animated feature. I thought that was something exclusive to the book. Because I think that sequence was particularly cool. I guess I tend to focus a lot with Batman on the stealth sequences, because I feel that one of the things that is a strength of Batman, you talk about a guy overcoming overwhelming odds and numbers that doesn't have superpowers. I'm into the whole, I didn't have an issue with Batman chopping down trees with his foot, but to me, it's far more interesting when you see a Batman who's able to use the environment to his advantage and coming through the chimney like that and doing that, whether it was in the animated feature or not. I'm asking the question because I'm not 100% sure, so I will admit that. But I like that sequence, watching it right now, because it is something that I think works with Batman gaming. Like when you get a chance to play Batman, like in those Arkham City games and stuff like that, and they hold the whole stealth thing into play, and you get to do that. I think that's an area where Batman gets an edge and an advantage when there's multiple numbers. The reason why I'm bringing up that game, because I thought one of the reasons why I like that series of games and so in particular is because Batman uses the environment to hide. Even when people are aware of him, he'll shoot up into the ceiling and like start jumping from gargoyle to gargoyle and things like that, and it will disorient and throw off, because of his outfit, the people that are hunting him. And here, when you see those events play out in this book, I'm like, yes, this is exactly why this character is so versatile. It's why Batman plays out well on the comic book page. It's why he plays out in a game. It's why he plays out in a movie. When they do him right, he's cool. Because, he's one of those characters that you can really get away with him taking on these crazy odd numbers. Batman Begins, that sequence where he pops out in that drug bust, in the initial one, where there was Flass. And, that was the one where he basically crucified the mob boss. And, that was how the bat symbol first got invented. In that whole sequence where you didn't see him through most of it, just these blurs of him coming down, pulling a guy out, those type of things. I like that kind of stick and, you mentioned earlier, stick and move. That kind of mentality is something that I've always enjoyed about the character. And the more you do that, if you're out doing that every night, you can believe that a man would get so good at it that he would be flawless, because it's something that you do every night. Your practice makes perfect. And it's something I just really enjoy about the character, and it suspends my disbelief. It makes me believe that this man can do these and keep doing these amazing things that he does, because he's just so darn good at it.
It's that parkour, that free running, where you see those guys just effortlessly move across, this, anywhere, and they can turn it into a little arena and do some amazing flips and jumps and spins and whatnot. And it's that type of, it's just regular comfort with with that type of movement that it makes you believe it. It's one of the things that I like about Dick Grayson being the acrobat, that you're so in, it's such a part of his body that it's second nature for him. He can do this stuff eyes closed, blindfolded, just because he knows exactly how his body is going to line up. He knows it's envisioned in his head. Bruce is that same way with the fighting style. It's you have to have that fluidity, you have to have that motion in the combat. And again, it's some cool stuff seeing Batman do this. He improvise, adapt, overcome. He's lost the utility belt, which I like that they explained, because the thermite in the belt actually got ignited. So maybe in the future he's going to figure out a better way to insulate his thermite so it doesn't blow up. But this is the beginning bat. So now he's got to do a little bit of scrambling here. Trap some guys down, drop some smoke on them, taking out some other ones, using the shadows as he needs to. It's, again, he's got to have that style, he's got to have that flow, and it brings a believability to Batman.
No fear.
Yeah.
I like that. The parkour, when you mentioned the parkour style, I like that no fear of that. Like, you see these guys and you're like, I can't do that in a million years, but I am so impressed by it. Because you have to have no fear if you get to the point, or you've hurt yourself plenty of times that you know how to avoid it. But I always have admired people who are able to pull that off, because it requires, like you mentioned with Dick Grayson, I think people are born with an innate acrobatic sense. Now, that's not to say that I'm not saying that people who do parkour don't practice. It's just the opposite. I think there's an intense amount of practice that goes into it, and an intense amount of skill that comes from training yourself. But I think people have a natural body type and natural ability, muscle-wise, that it's like a boxer. Can everybody become a boxer? Well, you can train to become a boxer, but there's some people who are born to be a boxer. I think with parkour, there's people who are just naturally gifted acrobats, they have that kind of skill set, that when they no matter how hard I train, I'm not going to be able to do the things that they do when they train just as hard. They're going to run circles around me. So no matter what kind of equal training we do, or even if I try to double their training regimen, which isn't going to happen because most of those guys are insanely, fit anyway. But there's something about that I admire, and I think that works in the comics. I love that you see with Bruce and Dick Grayson in particular, and that's a great example that you're using, that Dick Grayson's got this natural thing for speed, agility, the way he jumps and kicks. He's always been drawn in a way where there's a big distinction between how he fights and how Batman fights. And I've always thought that was an interesting thing that they did in the comics, and that translated well into the animation and stuff like that, because it made it that he was really a partner, because he brought something a little different to the table that just fit. And I don't know, something that I've always loved about the whole comic bit. And then we get into gadgets, bad gadgets. You're mentioning the belt before, the heel. And I like that he didn't know what the range was. This is, something that obviously he's not running around testing this thing everywhere. So this was, a prototype type of deal for him where he's testing it and it works. He didn't know what the range would be. So what a lucky break. But also it's a field test of that gadget as well, which I was really liked being a part of that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You think about just, again, Batman is all about the preparation. That's a classic Batman, but this is the beginning of that. So we're seeing here, this is the first field testing. This is the first thing laying it out, and you look at just how everything played out. If it wasn't for those bats, he'd be toast. I can't, without that cover, without that coming in there, I don't see how Bruce could have gotten out of this, because he was really just completely outgunned. And even though he has better training and more skills than the SWAT team, they had sheer number and just sheer firepower. They would have gotten to him. And I thought I liked getting that kind of a sense of desperation, but he wasn't, I want to say desperation, but he wasn't desperate. He was at that point where he's starting to get, okay, things are starting to get bad here. I got to figure this out. And you kind of see him getting trapped and pinned down as they're just unleashing a barrage of bullets, to the point where they're not even thinking of safety, of that there's people standing outside that window and you're shooting into a crowd and you're going to hit innocent people. They're just opening fire. It's the spray and pray, tactics, and so both parties have that desperation, but there is a bit in Bruce that you're like, this is going to be a tough one for him.
I like that internal dialogue about the Siamese.
Yeah,
and that was another one. You mentioned it last time we were talking about this, how there was sometimes missing internal dialogue that sometimes helps you get pulled into the story in the world. It kind of connected to me, Bruce and Selena, in those moments, because she was saying the same thing about the Siamese, and I don't know how much of that would play out well having that much internal dialogue in an animated feature, so that's not necessarily a knock, but I really enjoyed how it played out here on the page.
Yeah, and I think that's the advantage that comic books do have over the animated, that they can get away with more inner dialogue here than you can in the animated, for that exact reason. A lot of people who are watching the physical films, they don't, for whatever reason, they don't put it in there, and I've seen a lot in variations of different types of movies where I'm like, you know what? A nice inner dialogue here would work great, or a nice inner monologue where you can see that it's the person thinking it, not speaking it, or an over narration of the actual visual images that we're seeing would be kind of a cool add-on, and you don't get that a lot of times in the movies.
I did like, though, and I guess this is where it worked, I thought, and it's where it's interesting, because I totally agree with everything you're saying, but when you get to this bit where he was hiding under the stairs, there was something better about it when we didn't get an internal dialogue from him. When he was hiding, the quieter it is, it gives you more of a sense of his need for stealth. That's not taken away in the comic with more dialogue, if that makes sense. I think that the two mediums, because of their lack of or intense amount of audio, I think it makes it work one way or the other depending on what they're doing.
I was going to say, yeah, I kind of agree and kind of don't agree.
Okay.
I'm not going to sit here and say, no, you're wrong, because it's not anything I'm too fiery passionate about, but I think the silence for me, and that was kind of a sequence in the action sequence, I think that's where I get more of my understanding of Bruce was a little bit more desperate. Whereas when you're listening to the inner dialogue, you see, okay, he's got a plan still. He's thinking this through. He's moving, and but him sitting in silence, it's almost, in a way, it's kind of taken as, okay, he's got to hide. Not that he's choosing to hide.
Well, he had to hide there, too. I don't see, I think we're reading the story differently then. Because I didn't feel like in this one his hiding concept was any different than it was in the animated feature. One of the things that I liked about the animated feature where the silence helps is you get to get that music built up, which I thought the soundtrack and the action sequences, and that's something you don't have in the comic. And that's where I think there's a certain element of silence and then a musical build that just, and sound effect build that adds to an intensity in a way that in the comic you're doing it through the internal dialogue. And that's where I think the two of them are kind of complementary to each other. I don't feel like in this one that somehow Bruce is any less feeling like he's in danger, especially when this guy's talking about everything that has happened with his utility belt breaking down, and I've made a mess of things, let it all get out of hand, the enemy is closing in, relentless, unstoppable. Like, when you see that sequence right before he hides under the stairs, I don't all of a sudden say to myself, wow, he's a lot more confident in the comic. I mean, that was the immediate dialogue right before he goes under the stairs. So I guess I don't feel like there was a lack of that sense in the film. I felt like the film felt just as much, he was in just as much danger.
Okay, yeah, and as I said, I'm not going to argue, this is a point I'm not really so passionate about that I'd argue and fight over. It just, for some reason, I had a feeling like Bruce was in more control in the comic than he was in the movie. I think it's just because you see him constantly assessing the situation, and you hear he's constantly, when you're reading it, you actually know, okay, he's got this plan, he's laying this out. Whereas in the movie, it seemed like it was more, I don't know, I just got a feeling it's the exact same images, so it's not really any different, but it was just...
That's not true. That's not true. There actually is a sequence where it is different. That bit with the cat, where, he's got the blow dart ready to take the guy out. Remember the cat ran out in the film, and that alerted the guy? The guy turned around to look because the cat ran out? I'm actually going to back you up a little bit here. Because, remember, in that sequence, the cat ran out, the guy turns around and sees Bruce. That's what happened in the animated feature. Here, the cat ran out. It didn't direct the guy's back to Batman. They didn't get directed on him until he hit the guy with the dart. Bruce was driven to hit the guy with the dart when the cat shot out in the film. Mm-hmm. So there is a difference and a distinction that actually backs up a little bit of what you're saying here. I actually agree to a certain part of your point there because the film version was a little bit different because it was the cat that alerted the guy.
Cool.
So there was a little bit of a tone difference. So I guess I'm like kind of absorbing what you're saying and thinking back to what was going on in the image. I'm like, wait, there was actually that one sequence where the under the stairs thing, not when he initially goes under the stairs, but actually afterwards, and that does lead to a sense of that whole bit played out in a way that wasn't under Bruce's control. Whereas here, he chose to hit the guy and then stick and move and roll.
Yeah.
Whereas in the film, you got that sense of after he hit the guy, they all, because, the Siamese, I guess it was that Siamese cat again, shot out and the guy turned around to look, they all became aware of him and then Bruce had to scramble. It did feel, I guess, from that point, it did feel a lot different to me. It was really when the cat came into play that it veers off for me. So I guess I do see your point there. Here's a part where I think in both the comic and in the film, though, it does show his training and his sense of surroundings and his sense of being protective. When he rescues the cat. They're in the middle of gunning for him. And dude rolls, grabs the cat, lifts the cat out the window, and takes a bullet in the process. I just thought there was something really cool about that, because I like animals. And there was something in just in that moment where I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool that Batman took a bullet for a cat.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It was kind of cool, especially cat goes out and hops in Selena's arms, and but that it's funny because as I say how cool that was and how neat it was, part of me in my head is like, dude, it's just a cat. Now I'm an animal lover. I like cats, so don't people yell at me. But if I had to choose between my life and a cat, I'm going with mine. I'm not going to risk it to save a cat. It's just But again, as I'm saying this, I agree with you 100% that it was cool that Bruce did that. It was a neat sequence where you see him bobbing, weaving, rolling, pitching the cat out, and he then continues on the fight. And even in a way, you can argue that he did that and it pulled them into the spot where he then does the super, he does, kicks the support beam and drops the stuff down on top of the SWAT. So by putting himself in a quote unquote, back in a corner, dangerous situation, what he really did the old rope-a-dope. Pull them in, get them thinking, yeah, we got them, swarm them, storm. Okay, yeah, you keep storming, gather, bunch yourselves up, and get it so I can do one swoop, bam, and take you all out in one movement. So it's, as I'm saying, there's more to it than that. There is more of a planning, and did Bruce completely plan that, or was this more of a happy accident that it came out? I'm not 100% certain either way.
When he kicks down the column, did you have as much issue with that as what you did with the tree?
No.
Because did you notice the tree, like in the earlier shot, like a couple pages back, where the tree looks rotted?
See, I never took it as rotted. I took it as just wintertime, no leaves on the tree.
But look at that tree in the drawing. Like, even where it meets, that doesn't look rotted to you?
Hold on, let me get back to it.
What is the Bat Cave, I call it?
Yeah.
In my family manor, if my family manor weren't placed over a huge cave, the Bat Cave, I call it. I look at where that tree, I guess I've always taken it that tree was rotted. And I might be wrong. I mean, if you see it totally differently, I respect that. I have no problem with that. It's just kind of, if you look where he did the kick, and you take a look at, like, it almost looks like it's already rotted in those areas. And that may not be the intention of the artist, but that's the way I saw it.
And again, okay. I'm
not saying you have to. I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm saying that's my interpretation. You know how you can look at a painting and one person can see it one way, another person can see it the other. You may totally view that a different way than I do. That's the part where I kind of see it that way. But that doesn't explain how he's kicking through a column then. So we're back to that.
My explanation on kicking through the column is different than the tree. Because if it's a living tree, it's designed to. Because I take it that's a living tree. Living trees are designed to take up winds and bend and bow and whatnot. The column, if you find that right spot, if you find the sweet spot, you can break it. Now that's a normal person can do it. That's the whole principle behind breaking boards and breaking bricks and all those other martial art type stuff. That there is that finite. It's not it doesn't have the living essence of like a tree would have. The stone, the brick, the boards, all that stuff. You can find the right spot to hit it and take it down. Especially this column, because this building's so old. It already had a firebomb dropped on it, so that would weaken the foundation. That would make things a little bit, shaky. So I didn't have any issue with him kicking down the column just for those basic principles. My only issue I had with that tree was it's a living tree. And living trees are designed to sway, bob, and weave and actually take the outside forces.
And you're taking what, because that originally was done in February, that was a living tree?
Well, yeah. I'm taking it's not a dead, rotted tree. It's just a tree that is alive, but is, wintertime, hibernation and whatnot.
Okay. I guess I can kind of see it that way. It's Bruce and his tree.
And again, let me just say, for the record, I don't really have an issue with Bruce doing that just because this is Batman. He's got training beyond us mere mortal people who will never be able to reach this level of skills and training and all that. But there's always something when I see stuff like that, it always just triggers in my head. Especially like if I see in movies where the martial art movies where they're doing these supernatural freaky stuff, and you're like, come on, really? Right there, you had some cool action sequences. You didn't need this superhuman feat.
You mean like kung fu movies?
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, where they're like jumping like insane distances and then attacking each other at like insane speed. I love that stuff. But actually the comparison's really good here because I see your point. I like the one where Bruce went after the guy that tried to shoot the cat, and that was the guy that went through. That's an area where we didn't know that in the film. And that was kind of cool to see that he took that step. The bat bit plays out very well in both sequences. Like when they finally show up, and that was something that they pulled straight into Batman Begins. And I don't know why it was this time around that I noticed that. When I saw Batman Begins, I didn't connect it to Year One. And I don't know why, but when I read this time through, I'm like, oh, that was like Year One got that straight from here. I feel like a dunce for not catching that and making the connection. I mean, I caught it in both vehicles, both deliveries of this type of story. But I don't know why I never caught that all the way through. Did you find anything like that where you were like surprised that it had been in a film or something like that, and you were just like,
Well, the bat sequence, the bat sequence you're talking about, that was another. I'm trying to remember when I first read Year One. I really think it was when we started the podcasting, but I don't know. I don't remember anymore. My life has been. I don't remember anything anymore. But when I was reading through this time, I saw that suit. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And there's a couple of the meetings with Gordon, and just the beginning phases throughout this has been. You kind of see the origins of where they can get inspirations from the movie, where they can get where they pull the subject matter, where they pull the threads from.
Yeah, and I actually really respect how much they pulled from the classic Batman stories for those films. Especially ones like this that are so beloved, and there's a reason why. One of the sequences that I really liked in this is after that, when you see everyone get vaccinated, or inoculated from all this, the bit that like Gordon recognizes that Batman paid off the suit guy.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really great. That's how he covered for himself. That's how he made the getaway. But he covered for himself there. And that was like one more sequence that like Gordon can say, who am I dealing with here? Like, why should I feel this is a bad guy? And that was something that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and again, it's more of the stuff where Gordon is looking beyond just what he's being told. Gordon's looking for the truth, and you need to have that in this character, because we've had so many issues with him that you're like, why are you doing this, Jim? Come on, you're better than this. You still see the good cop. You still see that true sequence, and I gotta tell you. That bat sequence flying out, I think I enjoyed it more in the animated than I did in the comic, just because that was such a great physical element to it that it was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
Well, they expanded it there, too.
Yeah.
Because remember, it led to a high-speed chase that you do see here, but not as spread out. Remember, we saw a helicopter chase there that you couldn't do on the page. Like, to show sequence after sequence after sequence of that motorcycle one wouldn't work. But that was one of those that I thought that they expanded more in the animated feature, rightfully so, because you can. The bits in June 9th with Jim Gordon and Essen. How do you feel about, I know you're talking about it right now where you still look at him as a good cop because of all his questioning. This relationship with him and Sarah Essen, how do you ultimately feel about it? Because it plays out, to me, I think the play out in the comic, because when they have that diner bit, I know I'm jumping a little ahead on this, and when we get to it, we can just gloss through it. They have that diner bit that's coming up where, they have their kiss and everything, but then he eventually comes back later and breaks it off with her. And we see in the comic that she's still around after that, as she's getting ready to transition out and move. And the two of them still have this thing together where he admits to himself that he loves her and he's in love with her. What do you think about that and that relationship? How does that feel? Because I guess I've got my own personal feelings about it because of what I've read with featuring the two characters. You don't have that kind of reading, though. So where are you at on the relationship? What does that feel like to you, knowing what you know about Gordon's whole life right now?
Well, this has always been this is the hardest part about this. Probably the hardest part about Year One for me is this affair, is the relationship. And I still look at it as an affair, not a future relationship.
Right.
Because I really haven't read the continuation of these two. I haven't seen where this actually plays out and how, she comes back and everything that happens between them. But it's a tough call for me because I always, the cheating, the infidelity, and it's like his wife isn't doing anything wrong. And that's the part where I always get hung up on when I look at Gordon, when I think about him. Because if, I've known a lot of people who've, had, affairs and who've had issues with their wives and husbands and whatnot and divorce and just all this type of stuff. And whenever you start looking at your friends, you can always figure out, okay, because of this or because of this or this happened or something like this, and he's crazy, she's crazy. You can always put a blame on somebody. With the evidence I have in front of me here, if I was with this, I would be siding with Gordon's wife.
Yes.
And I hate the fact that, because I love Gordon as such a character. I think he's a great person and a great cop. But if I was in Gotham, if I was, in the department or a friend or whatnot, I would be siding with the wife right now. I would be saying, your husband's an a-hole. He's a jerk. What are you doing with this guy? This is wrong. He's had an affair on you. He cheated on you, and you're sitting here pregnant. You moved to this city because he messed up in Chicago, and now he does this to you. What are you doing? You could do better than this guy.
Did he mess up in Chicago?
Well, again, it's...
No, but what do you think happened to him in Chicago? What is your impression on that?
Oh, well, I think he found a corrupt cop, and he brought him up on charges, and it was they right. protect their own. And they said, no, it kind of got swept under the rug, and he became the scapegoat. And they're like, okay, you're out of here. And it was the whole thing that he was worried about when he first came to Gotham. It was like, make sure you got all your ducks in a row before you accuse another cop. It's part of it is part of life that there is going to be some protection. There is going to be the good old boy network. There is going to be that especially if you get a corrupt situation where the crooked are going to protect each other to a certain extent. So when you got Gordon in there, who's the quote-unquote troublemaker, they're going to get rid of him because it's going to keep, they want to keep everything going nice, smooth, and easy. We see that in Gotham. I'm thinking probably almost a similar situation happened to him in Chicago. Only difference is in Gotham, he became the hero. He became untouchable because the media loved him. So they couldn't, run him out of town. They couldn't, do what they did to him in Chicago.
Well, here's my thing. And this is where I blame Gordon. And, I guess I blame him now because of what information I have, because I don't know what their relationship was like in Chicago. When he's coming here, do you think he has an open line of communication with his wife?
Probably not.
No.
They probably have communication issues.
Right. And I think part of that is there's a lot of things that he's getting from Essen because he can talk openly with her that he can't get from his wife. Now, I don't know whose fault that is. I'm leaning towards the fact that a lot of his fears and things he should have been communicating with his wife. So I'm leaning in her, like you, on her side. Gordon's not talking when he should be. And Essence seems to be the one where he's finding the freedom to kind of unload about his past and how it's affecting him now. That's what happens at the diner. It's finally this sense of, wow, I'm telling this person everything and she's not judging me. And I think that's where that relationship came from there. I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. And I really like that sequence. I agree with you there that it's hard to agree with him. This, of course, leads to June 15th, Bruce Wayne. And I love that he's kind of making up his own cover story.
Yeah.
By doing this crazy skiing stunts. But it's also leading, and this is an event that was missing from the animated film that I would have liked to have seen with the internal dialogue. This part where he sits here saying, I need an ally, an inside man. I need Jim Gordon on my side. And we know, as the storyline goes on, about his relationship with Harvey Dent. But still, that need for a Jim Gordon because of his particular role, I don't know, that's something I've always particularly loved.
Yeah, and it was funny because the inner dialogue I absolutely loved.
Mm-hmm.
But the physical skiing sequence, I don't know if it's weird because part of me on one hand, I'm like, did we really need Bruce to fly to Switzerland and do the skiing? Or could this have been done somewhere else because he's paying somebody off to act to be him? But does he actually, it's a kind of a catch-22 that I'm in. Like, do we need him out there? But if he's not out there, can he really reinforce or trust that his secret's going to be protected? It's a combination. On one hand, I say he doesn't need to be there, but then as I'm saying he doesn't need to be there, I'm like, he kind of does. He does need to physically be in Switzerland. He can explain to the person that he's having cover for him that, I was in the middle of something, but here I'm now. Yay, let's party, let's have fun. And he can lay out, the groundwork and the cover for the full plan. Whereas if he had the guy do the full cover the entire time, that could give him some issues and that could give him problems later. So with this sequence, I started off saying, they didn't need it. But then as I started, rereading the sequence, seeing how important the inner dialogue is, and then started thinking beyond the pages. I'm like, yeah, they kind of did need these couple, 4 panels in here just to add to the level of what Bruce has to do to cover, what Bruce has to do to convince people that he is not Batman.
I 100% agree. This and the hotel, when he's doing that, pretending that he's, with the Hollywood starlet and that type of thing. Those are all things that I just think, to me, add more of a sense of realism to him actually covering it up and not relying on, the cowl being off. The plausible deniability where you do have alibis and people can place you in certain places. Even if people are still thinking themselves, I still think it's him, they can't prove it because he's covered his tracks so well. That's something I really enjoy about this. And I like the ski sequences because they were very James Bond.
Yeah. And again, it also just shows Bruce, with his, his ability to just recover and deal with the pain. Because the amount of pressure he's putting on his legs that have been freshly shot, that's got to be huge. And that's got to hurt like heck. But this is Bruce. He's able to push beyond the pain because he needs to be on the slope to cover and protect the broken leg angle. He's right here. He's building, there are going to be now people in Switzerland who say, yeah, I was there when Bruce Wayne, broke his leg on the ski slope. He was skiing at night. What was he doing? He's crazy. He was probably drunk. Oh, he's probably high. You know how these celebrities are. You know how these billionaires are. And just the story will escalate. It would go from a simple skiing thing where Bruce does a flip to Bruce was racing in a crazy drunken moment, and then it'll just escalate without any help from anybody. We saw that with the Porsche sequence. We saw that when eventually he has Gordon in his home. Just everything where it builds on what people perceive and then what their mind just continues it on one step beyond what he's laying out.
I like Gordon's guilt, where he recognizes that Gotham's changing him to a certain extent, although he brought some of that baggage with him. And I do think we've kind of determined that this guy had some issues before he came to Gotham. But he's taking a look at everything that's going on around him and all the corruption and the relationship he's building with Essen and Batman. How he should be on the hunt and angry and on the prowl for Batman, but yet considering everything that he sees around him, it's so hard to do that because of this guy and the evidence that's before him. He saved that old woman. He saved that cat. He even paid for that suit. The hunk of metal in my hands is heavier than ever. I really liked this cliffhanger because it wasn't a forced somebody's in danger. It was leaving us in a place at the end where we've been following Jim Gordon and this affair and this humanity that this guy's got, and sitting there, and obviously, as any friends would, you're like sitting here saying, whose side do you want to take on this one? And, God, Jim, I want to help you. I want to talk to you and tell you, hey, it's time to open up and start, talking to your wife and getting her thoughts and feelings, but letting her support you too. This is when she's pregnant, she's massaging you because you're like so tense and everything. And, where did it all start falling apart between you two? And there's something just about it that's so great. I remember rereading this years after, like, Sarah Essen was already in a relationship with Jim Gordon. Had already come back. And I didn't remember her, like, when they brought her back again. I didn't remember her from year one. I don't know why. I had a brain freeze. So when I read year one again, I'm like, oh, my gosh. Like, years ago, I'd read this girl inside this book. Now she's back in such an important part of Gordon's life. I like her backstory.
Now, a question for you: with talking inner dialogue or verbal, dialogue. In the comic, we have that great inner dialogue where Essen's talking about how people thought she was too masculine, and in his inner dialogue, he's like, "Whoever told her she was masculine must have been blind, deaf, and dead." In the movie, he physically says it out loud to her. Whoever told you you're a masculine, I must say, and he actually physically says it to her. Of the two options, which one do you prefer?
I think the two options work the best for the particular medium. Like, here's the thing. When he's sitting across the table from her, I want to hear some interaction from them. In the comic, I'm strangely okay with the fact that, assuming that there was dialogue happening between the two of them in between all of that, but hearing it in his head and seeing it the way that he was, feeling like I was looking through his eyes, worked well in the comic. I'm not trying to cop out on it. I get what you're going for here. To me, I thought both choices worked for their particular medium. If that makes sense. Like I thought it was cool that he said it to her in the film. I didn't find myself I'm not looking back at the comic and going right now, geez, I wish he'd say it to her here. I just think it worked on the film that way. But I like the way that it was done here just as much. And I don't know that I have a favorite. I just like the whole theme and tone.
Yeah, see, on my end, and I'm going to say I did enjoy how it played out in the movie, but I do enjoy how this whole sequence, that whole diner sequence, played out in the comic. Because for me, his inner dialogue had me thinking, okay, they really went in depth in talking. You know, and I for some reason I was better able to envision these two spending hours sitting at that cafe because waiting for the rain, and just all that capstoning into him thinking that, you know, whoever told her she was masculine, and that whole sequence there really is for me, I think I got a better sense of the longevity of this, the more in depth, the closeness that they had, because the movie was more based on the physical words spoken, and there wasn't that much said physically between them.
Oh my gosh, you're wrong there. But no, because I've got to defend that, because there was a whole sequence leading up to that where, like, he was opening up to her about what happened to him before, and he was like letting his vulnerability out, talking to her in a way that it was clear he doesn't talk to his wife. Those sequences were not put in here. Like, there's not a sense here that he's opening up to her and kind of letting out his inner angst. And I thought in the film, one thing that they really established well is, for the first time, he's comfortable enough to let out all of these emotions that he's been bottling up. And it, to me, led to, like, if he had done this with his wife, he wouldn't have had the affair with her. But because he opened up with her like that and was not doing it with his wife, it to me further showed the real disjointed nature of the relationship that he has with his wife. And I thought that the film handled that brilliantly. Now, I don't know that would have played out as well, and I'll defend you here. I don't know that would have played out as well in the comic book, because I think the way that it plays out in the comic book was very sweet and very, there's that sense of everything you're saying. So I agree with what you're saying. I just disagree with the way that you're saying that, like, the film kind of didn't add a sense of depth and drama to it, because I think it just did it in a very different way. And that sense of him being able to open up with her was something I really thought, like, I thought that the comic was showing one side of it, and the film had the opportunity to show us what they were actually saying. And I thought it was great to have those two together. I thought they were interesting complementary pieces to each other versus one contradicting the other, where it was like a scene where you felt like, wow, that's really drastically different. So that was kind of my take on it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, because I mean,
no. I get what you're saying, and they did handle it well. It was a good sequence in the movie, but for me, it's in the comic. I actually got more play out in my head in the comic, because I find that when I'm reading these things, that I do have that off-screen, where my head goes, continues on with just a couple panels. I actually see the conversation they had, even though there's nothing written. Whereas when I'm watching the physical movie, I find that I personally don't have 2-3 steps beyond it as I'm watching it. Later on, when I'm thinking about a sequence, I'll play it out. But when I'm physically sitting there watching a movie, I'm only focused on the information they're really giving me. Whereas with a comic, while I'm reading it, I will start, especially if I'm locked into something, like I was locked in with this, I will start looking, beyond the page, even before I leave the page as I'm reading through it. And that's why the second and third read-through I really take my time and I really flesh out what I'm seeing just inside my head and going beyond the page. And that's why I like this sequence better in the comics, because of the way I read it and the way I look at it and the way I watch movies. So it's, again, I'm not going to argue with how the movie did a great job with building the relationship and showing the lag, the problems between Jim and Barbara, but there is just for me, I think it's, I don't know, I really appreciated how this, and I enjoyed. If I had to pick between the two, I'm going with this sequence. I'm definitely going right here. How this played out.
See, I'm greedy. I don't feel the need to pick between the two. If I generally don't like, if I thought one was better, and I've done it plenty of times between the last recording and this one where I've picked out sequences I thought were better. But in this one, I don't think one is better than the other. I personally, for me, I think that they show more of this sequence than I got to see in either one of them. Like, together, they're a nice companion. I don't know, what did you think their inner dialogue was before seeing the animated feature?
Just general family chat. Just because she's talking about how she's from Chicago, talks about her family, her upbringing, and I can just see them. I could see it starting off as just a light, friendly conversation about, the rib shack, and just the general conversation. And then as it just starts fleshing out, as it starts going, and you see him opening up, and in my head, I saw him opening up what happened in Chicago. I saw him telling her everything that happened over there, and just as it's going on, and it's just the human interaction and the dialogue between the two of them.
Yeah, see, I didn't see it going.
We did get that in the movie, but in my head, I did see it going farther. I did see them going into who the true essence behind them are.
Yeah, see, and I never got the impression that he opened up to her about Chicago there, because it's really not until almost the 2 panels before they kiss that they even mention Chicago, and they're just talking about a place they went for ribs, and there's nothing to indicate that he even said anything to her at all other than they started kissing. I quite like the idea in the film that when they were sitting at the diner, he started opening up to her and really pouring his heart out over what happened in Chicago and kind of venting those things. I still believe firmly he should have been venting that to his wife all along, and that was where he was going horribly wrong. He was making a choice instead of, sticking to the one he was committed to, and I get it. See, this is where I kind of defend him a little bit. Now, I'm not saying I'm condoning his actions. I'm not at all. But what's happening is he's so become convinced because she's pregnant and, he was bringing her to this dangerous place and all that he needs to protect her, that he shut her off by doing that, instead of opening up and talking and letting that happen between them. I don't know. So there's something about that sequence where he's talking to Sarah in that moment that rung more true to me as far as who I think Jim Gordon is as a person and where some of his faults were in this whole sequence, because he definitely has a lot of faults here, but a lot of it is in the breakdown of his marriage and the intercommunications. I don't know. So it's an interesting bit, and I guess I don't know, even in reflection, this discussion, I think it's a matter of preference. I don't know that I'm necessarily disagreeing with anything you're saying, because I agree with you on the sequence. I think that this sequence, looking at it, it's a beautiful sequence, and I can see why you like it. And I could even see, being honest, I could even see why you like it more. I'm like, okay, I can get that would be, because the artwork's certainly pretty, and it builds a mood. And I think the rainy kiss between the two of them there's something about how that all plays out. So I see all that. There was something about that dialogue, though, that I felt like for some reason enhanced this part for me, which is a sequence that I already loved, being enhanced more by supplementary material. For some reason, is something I'm always a fan of. So I guess it's just sharing two different perspectives versus there needing to be one of us right, because I don't necessarily feel that from this conversation.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I don't think there is I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on this. Both sequences were actually really good, and so it's I don't know. It's just a personal preference, and it's.
And you're right to honestly, you're right to have that. I guess I can kind of see that. I think I'm very passionate about my preference, and I'm kind of like sitting there, I'm like, do I really feel like there's a need to be? I don't know that I feel a need to be right on this. It's right for me. And it sounds like it's really right for you. And I agree. Honestly, your commentary about why you were so emotionally drawn to that sequence, I quite agree with, because it is a very emotionally cool sequence visually. I'm a big fan of both. So I guess that's why I'm having trouble in certain sequences. I'm more defending the film because I really liked it so much than downplaying your commentary on what you like about the book, because I agree with your comments about the book. The book is, I think the ability of this universally to continue after all this time, to be timeless and to evoke emotion like that, says a lot. Because sometimes with a book it gets dated, not because there was anything wrong with the original creators when they created it. It's just it's a story that was set in a time, and it kind of feels like it still belongs there. The dialogue, the language, and everything that's in there, just and the events, and even the way the characters are drawn with what they're wearing and things feel out of place. This just feels like it could be happening right now. And there's something about that that's pretty magical, that you can create something that somehow holds that timeless quality. And that's where I'm a Marvel fan. I love the Marvel films. I love the Marvel characters. I love that they're set in real world places like New York and stuff like that. And I know DC's dabbling in that and stuff, and they've been, with Nightwing going to Chicago, and they've dabbled with regular real world places as well. Especially things like Animal Man and stuff like that. And they keep doing it. But places like Gotham, places like Metropolis, they're crafted in such a way that I think they're representative of a concept of a place, of a city, and they somehow manage to maintain a timeless quality. Metropolis is always that big, booming world of tomorrow. And in the comics, they gradually adapt Metropolis in such a way that it keeps doing that. But Gotham's this like classic, timeless, gothic place with that crazy, cool architecture. But you know that the people is financially, there's a ton of them there. There's a lot of people financially that are hurting in Gotham. And there's a lot of places that are run down in Gotham. And there's something about that feels true to even, with us. There's places in downtown Cleveland that feel like that. Any big city has that. So it feels like the timeless big city. And I don't know, there's something about that I just really quite enjoy in this book. For some reason, it just holds up really well because of the timeless quality of the whole thing.
Oh, God, yeah. And timeless is definitely a word I would use to describe this story, because, and it's funny, as you're talking, I'm just sitting there quietly nodding my head saying, yes, yes, yes. This is definitely one of those things that you could pick this up now. You could pick this, I'm going to say 10 years from now, you'll be able to pick this book up and read it and enjoy it, just because this is such a solid foundation of who Batman is, who Gordon is, everybody. This is a great origin, and it's not just for Batman. Like the first time we see Selina in the Catwoman costume, I did cheer, especially how we see her leave her former profession where she drops her pimp. I thought that was great. Punches him, knocks him out cold, grabs Holly and saying, "We're changing jobs. I got an idea." And I love just the fact that this is how it's initially starting the Catbird. This is initially how it's starting. We've already seen that Selina has some fighting skills. She can take care of herself. She can bob and weave. She can do what she needs to do. Now the beginning of the birth of the Thief, the beginning of the Catwoman is coming out. And I really enjoyed seeing that happen as well.
Were you surprised at how this held up? Did you expect it, because it was an older piece, to feel dated or maybe not quite match today? Because I wasn't sure what to expect myself, so I'll admit that I was walking into this wondering, because it had been so long since I'd read it, I was wondering how I was going to feel about it connecting. I think the animated feature obviously made me think otherwise, but I'm talking about before watching the animated feature, I was wondering if the animated feature would make changes to make it feel more modern, and I was so pleasantly surprised to see how much both of them were connected, and how they didn't alter much of anything in order to make it feel more modern, because it didn't need to. But were you surprised by that?
Yeah, actually, I would say, and I didn't know. I was kind of like in your shoes, where I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if this would hold up. I was kind of curious. I wonder how this story is going to play out when we started reading it. And I made sure to reread, or read, year one before watching the movie, because I wanted to. I wanted to have the original first and then go into the other one. So I did actually, the way I did it, I did my first read through of year one. I did my second art read through, and then did a third read through, and then watched the movie. So I really did a regular read through and got pretty comfortable with year one before watching the movie, because I really wanted to see, okay, what the kind of differences was. I didn't want to, while I was watching the movie, going, is that different or is that not different? I wanted to have a comfortability with the original. And as I'm reading it, it was the first thing that hit me. I was like, man, this is cool. This definitely fits. And then going into the movie, I was like, okay, what did they change? And you start seeing, a lot of the sequences, they took panel for panel. They took it literally exactly how everything played out. It had that same look, had that same feel. So I'm like, okay, they stuck true to the original work, and that's why I enjoyed the movie. But I do put the comic a little bit above it, because I think I connected better with the comic than the movie. But it was still a really cool adaptation. It's a really true adaptation to the original work. So it's, I got to give full credit and full applause to the enjoyment of the movie because of that connection, because they didn't really, in my mind, it didn't look like they modified it or have to change it to, we got to tweak it for the modern society. No, they didn't. They kept it true to what it was.
See, that's why I really liked the film. I really thought the film is a great companion piece to this, because anything they did, any changes they made, were more to expand out things that they could expand out in film. So I thought that it worked really well. Before we go into issue 4, speaking of animated features, did you get a chance to see Superman Unbound?
No, I haven't.
It's wonderful. First of all, I want to give it, because I had a feeling you might not have caught it. It's Superman Unbound is the newest release in the animated feature series, and just for anybody out there who forgot to pick it up, or maybe you don't follow the animated releases like we do, the Superman Unbound is the Brainiac story from Jeff Johns, brought into an animated feature, and the character development of Clark, Supergirl, and the relationship with Lois. They made changes in this one to make it more accessible to people who, weren't reading the comics at the time and maybe not the continuity. But it feels like it was taken straight from there and put in today. But I like that for people who maybe aren't regular comic readers, it developed a relationship when it comes to Superman and Lois and gave you a real sense of, without spoiling anything, gave you a really real sense of how much it would be difficult to be dating somebody who is the Man of Steel, with everything that he does and sharing him with the world and, trying to live a normal life. So I'll leave that at that, because there's obviously, the film will go down a certain path with that, but that's where their relationship's at early on. There's love, there's understanding, there's respect, but there's also that cloud over them of just how difficult and how much burden there is to be in that relationship. And I thought it was really neat to see in a Superman world, because it felt so natural there. And I don't know, it's something I really enjoyed about it. And like, how does Superman deal with wanting to protect those that he loves while having a secret identity, and what does that mean? And it's really great. So it's a good movie. I'm only giving you a little piece of the puzzle. It's one of the creepiest Brainiac stories ever, because I don't remember growing up thinking Brainiac was creepy. And when I saw this story, it creeped me out in a good way. It's something that was nice and shocking and surprising. Because Brainiac was always the one that I saw as a kid. I remember him teaming up with Lex Luthor. He was this green guy. He didn't seem like physical threat. It was more of the intellectual threat to him. In this one, he has like the full package, and it seems to fit this guy who is this world destroyer. So anybody who hasn't seen it, I highly recommend checking out Superman Unbound and seeing how that story unfolds. Jim, before we pop back into talking about the issue number 4, my buddy Chris Kendall, we went to see Iron Man 3 on Friday, which was a stellar movie. I can highly recommend it for anybody that hasn't seen it. But he'd given me my birthday present, which my birthday was back in January. I've seen it multiple times, but you know how you're like in situations where it's like not appropriate to give gifts or something? We just haven't been in a situation where it like made comfortable sense. So he was kind enough to give me my birthday present. He got me 2 of those chess pieces for the DC Batman set. Yeah. Batman and the Joker from Eagle Moss. Have you seen these?
Yeah, I've seen some images of them.
Yeah, well, these are gorgeous. So he's got me set. I'm like, doggone it, I'm going to want to start getting the rest of the chess. Because they're beautiful pieces. So it's Batman and the Joker. And it was funny, I saw they actually have an alternate, variant set of Batman and the Joker that come from The Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but the Robin, I saw they have Damian.
Yeah.
They're fairly recent versions of the characters. Like, they have the Red Robin that's currently in the comic books. But puzzling is, the Red Hood that they have isn't the Jason Todd that we're used to. It's the Jason Todd from the Grant Morrison run. From Batman and Robin that wore the pill.
Yeah.
The big giant one.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know, like, it was interesting choices that they made as far as which variation they were choosing for the chess set. But it's a good-looking chess set. They have Batwoman and Katana. Katana's like the New 52 Katana. But they also have Black Bat, which... So it's funny, the interesting choices that they made as far as which character variations they did for the set. You know, they had I see New 52 ones, and I see ones that are pre-New 52.
Now, what did they use for like the Queen on the Batman side Queen?
I don't know. I haven't. I got to be honest with you. I haven't looked. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who that would be because I don't know where Catwoman falls.
Because that was the thing I'm thinking of with Jason Todd. If Jason's supposed to be a bishop, that's why they would go with the longer look, maybe.
Oh yeah. I guess that's what it is. Maybe you might be right. I don't know. I haven't I just literally got them on Friday, so I haven't had a chance to look much beyond. Other than I was looking for Damien. I was looking for. It's funny. I started looking for some of my favorite characters. So, because figuring that's the way I'll go in order, figuring I'll get the chessboard last if I actually think I'm going to get enough characters to put them on the chessboard. But I think it's super cool. I mean, it's a neat set. And for anybody that hasn't tried these Eagle Moss, they're these lead figurines that are made of the DC characters. They're imported, I believe, from the UK. And they're really gorgeous. I mean, the craftsmanship on them is just... I'm into, those type of display characters now. They come on a nice base. They just look like there was some really deep care put into them, and they look like a figure that would just last forever. And I'm into working on displays for my office where I record out of just characters and pop culture things and signed comics. I eventually plan to have the whole wall lined with that, and then shelves lined with all this stuff just to make it kind of a geek room. Not that it's pretty much already there, as I'm playing around with my plastic rings still for the Legion and stuff like that they did as pack-ins. Do you miss that? Hey, because we haven't seen a lot of that recently. Do you miss the pack-ins?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I get the stuff, but I wouldn't really do anything with it. I have all the rings, I have all the Legion stuff, but I don't know. When it comes out, I'm like, oh, that's cool, yeah, but then nothing happens with it. Especially now that I've got my house, I've got places to put these things. But as I'm thinking, I gotta not only do I have places to put it, now I have to unpack it. Now I have to figure out how am I going to display it. And it's just for me, I'm like, I don't want it looks cool, but I don't want the headache and hassle of actually figuring out how I'm going to put it out.
What if they'd already been out? You're mentioning because you moved and they're in a box.
Right.
But what if you had, do you think if they had already been out, you would have been displaying them somewhere?
Yeah, probably.
So...
Yeah, so I like the stuff, and it's funny, as we're talking, I'm looking at, the DC chess collection. I'm looking at some of the stuff online.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Yeah, it looks cool.
Well, here's the funny thing, that's the, I like the Wayne Casino chip pack-ins and stuff like that they did going along with Flashpoint. I'm kind of with you. I know where you're going, and I agree with your point. Okay, you get a lot of this stuff, and it just kind of sits. And I've got a lot of that stuff. But there's something at the time about it being packed in with the comic, that experience of that I think is really cool. I think pack-ins have always been, here's a great example. Do I like pulling a prize out of Cracker Jacks? Yeah. But, what do you do with those prizes? Because they're, literally they're, such disposable prizes. I don't have a shelf of Cracker Jack prizes. They're really done in one. And I think a lot of these comic book props, except for the fact for some insane reason, the Green Lantern Corps rings, or the various color Corps rings, for some reason I seem to find myself playing with them incessantly when we record. I don't touch them any other time, but when we're recording, for some reason, we'll start having a conversation, much like we are right now, and I've got 4 of them in my hand, and then I'm invariably flipping them around for no reason at all. But other than that, if we weren't recording right now, these would be sitting on this little. It's not a display shelf. It's a shelf that just happens to be to the right of my desk that's attached to it, where normally a hard drive, I guess, would go, or a CD drive. That attaches your computer. So I validate a lot of your point, other than there's something super cool when you get that issue and you see that pack in there and you tear it open, you're like, this is neat, when you're going to read the comic, whether you use it again or not. I like pack-ins. I'm a fan of those things. I hope that they find some reason to do it again when it makes sense, because they've done a good job of kind of revitalizing that weird little tchotchkes interest.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder how that works for retailers, though, if having those pack-ins make it harder to logistically put them on shelves and stuff.
Well, especially when you got the giveaways and you got to make sure who's getting it, how much is getting it. Then if they don't give them all away, then they're stuck with the stuff that they really can't sell.
Well, aren't they packed in with a comic though? Like, wouldn't it be like?
I don't know if it is.
Okay.
I'm assuming you get 1 for 1, but then again, even you figure if you get 1 for 1. What if not all of that book sells? Are you going to keep that ring, or that little whatnot set aside for when eventually that comic does sell? Or do you say, hey, forget it? This used to have pack-ins, it ain't having it anymore because we're past the initial date. What's the rules on that? And I think that would be, I think it'd be kind of neat because you would probably get people who would say, I want to get that. Yeah. But I think after the initial, rush for it, after the initial, ooh, that's cool, I think then they become, I would imagine they become a little annoyance.
Would you? Well, here's the question. If a book came with a pack-in at first, and you're seeking out that book to add it to your collection, would you pay more for it if it still had the pack-in in it? Or is it... Because, for me, I'm a story person, but I've got to admit, if I'm looking to get the issue to read it, and I have the option to buy it with the pack-in, I'm probably spending extra to buy it with the pack-in. That's just me. But is that how you do it, or you just not care? And there's no wrong answer there. I'm not setting you up for anything. I'm genuinely curious to see how you view that.
Depends on the amount. If it's a little bit, sure. If it's not, I'm not gonna. Using the Green Lantern, rings, for example. I thought those were cool. I was glad I got those, and I have, the full set, and, just like you, sometimes when we're recording, I put them on. Sometimes when I'm just sitting around the house, killing time, I put them on. It's, whatever. But if going later on, if there was like, oh, back in the 70s, they had this thing, I'm like, I wouldn't be too excited about it if I could get it for just a little bit more. But if they're like, oh, here, you can get the comic for $1, or you can get the comic in this plastic ring for $20. I'm like, I'll pay the $1 and just give me the book, and you keep the ring. I don't need I'm not going to drop that much. But if it's $1 or $1.25, I'm like, oh, I'm all in on that. Heck, even probably $2 I'd probably go for. But it's a true value on what I'm getting.
Okay, I guess I'm kind of in the same place. So it's really interesting when you have pack-ins and things like that. I don't know. I get geeky for that kind of stuff. I'm a sucker. I got to admit that. And there's a lot of those things are sucker things where it's kind of like, okay, if we put this in, it's going to get people excited. But I'm all for something where they I liked the cover thing this month that they did.
Yeah.
That crazy, the wacky cover thing that I should say last month now. The wacky covers that they did where it was like this shock cover. I thought that was a cool gimmick. And I'm into gimmicks. I think you can overdo gimmicks. I thought it was cool they did this for a month just as something to get people kind of excited, and I thought that was kind of neat. It's if they only do that and there's the stories don't back up, like a direction, then I'm going to have a real problem with it. But in this case, I just thought it was really, really cool that they were doing, pack-ins and stuff like that. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. Let's go on to this issue 407, which is the last part of this for us. This is from May 1987. This is another one of those covers that I think is great because it really fit the tone of where the story was going. You've got us wanting the inevitable confrontation between Batman and Gordon, and where is it going to lead? And this cover just came for me, it came at the right time because it's been building to this. So this is a great example of an artistic design that builds to a further anticipation that I don't know. This makes it a classic.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I'm looking at in the trade, I think this is the cover, but I'm not 100% certain, because
it's not there in order.
Right. It's because the image I have, it's kind of a shadowy image of Gordon. There's like the Gordon and Bruce, but then right at the gun, it has more coloration to it. So his gun hand pops.
Is it where Gordon's almost falling back and Batman's facing him?
It's not even, but it's the image itself isn't really drawn out.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But, Batman's you see the inside of his cape.
Yeah.
But the outside of it's lost in the black background. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, it's more of the opposite coloration. Like his cape, his cowl is white in what I'm looking at.
His cowl is white?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't see his cowl white at all in what I'm looking at. His cowl is black. You see his chin and jaw, but his cowl isn't white. I don't think you're looking at the same image I am.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think they have the same cover.
Because this is one where Gordon is facing Batman. Batman's kind of in one of those positions where he's leaped.
Yeah.
And his legs are pulled in.
Yes.
But it's what I'm seeing is he's all black, Batman, except for the inside of his cape and his suit. But the outside of his cape is part of like this black background.
Yeah, they changed the image for the trade. It's the same image, but they changed the coloration on it.
And I've got the digital in front of me, because what I ended up doing is grabbing the digital from this just because I don't know why. I don't know why I rebought this again. Because it's a great story. It was probably on one of those. I knew that we were coming up and doing this, and I think it was one of those months where they did like insane deals of 99 cents or something like that in classic stories. Because I'll do that. I'll go and rebuy things that like. It's funny digitally if I'm buying old material, it's for storylines, like where I'm getting a complete storyline versus singles and back issues. For some reason, I just like buying an arc, knowing that I can read it that way. But this leads into that September 2nd sequence that we talked about with Gordon, Sarah, and the whole bracelet thing. And did you have a preference in how this played out versus it being in the film or here, where you could actually hear her voice?
I don't think I had a preference either way. I thought it was kind of neat. And I like the fact of the whole bracelet aspect of it, because that really shows how far the affair came and has grown. Because of the fact that, the gift giving and all that, that's something we never saw really before that. We're seeing a closeness and a more intimacy. And this has been about, we're almost a month after, the kiss, after Gordon's guilt over what he's doing. So, they were continuing on. The affair was continuing on for this, month. And that gets me thinking, okay, if he's giving her gifts, it's, that whole compensation for guilt. It's this whole, okay, what am I doing? Or is it a true love? Is this really, where's Gordon's heart in this? And I thought that was kind of a neat sequence where he's ending it. And she's like, if your wife wasn't pregnant, would you leave her? And he's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, she knows as soon as she says it, she shouldn't have said the words. And she's like, because it puts him in an unfair position. It puts him in a bad spot. And it's one of those kind of realizations between the two of them. This is bad. We're in a bad spot here.
I'll answer it. Yes. I think he would have.
Oh, God, yeah. I think so.
I think the relationship with Barbara was at a point, because you see it ends up failing anyway. His relationship with Barbara was at a point where he couldn't communicate with her at all. I do think he would have eventually told her, because he was feeling the guilt already. I think he would have come clean before the pictures forced him to come clean. Or do you feel that? I don't know. I guess that's my perception of it. I don't know if you agree with me. Do you think he would have kept it secret?
No, I think he would have come clean. He would eventually, come out. Even if the pictures hadn't come to light, I think the pictures, sped up the process. But again, this Jim Gordon is a good guy. He is an honorable man. He's made this mistake. He's guilty over it. He does want to rectify. He does want to fix his relationship. If nothing else, he wanted to for the family's sake, for his child's sake, and just everything there. And eventually, he would have realized, yes, I've got to come clean with her. I've got to lay all the cards on the table, and we have to work at this. And that's, you get to that point where, okay, we got to, move forward on this, and we got to do this. So I think eventually he would have. But definitely the picture being shown sped up the process.
That's interesting that you say that, because I guess I'm questioning that. Not you. I'm questioning him. I think he's doing what he feels is the right thing. I also feel like he's doing what he's doing out of guilt. I don't feel that he's motivated to somehow rectify his relationship at home. Like, I think he's going to try to be faithful, but I don't think all of a sudden the two of them are going to have this honest, open, talking relationship out of all this. And I don't see him going to, like, even if they go to some counseling or something like that together, I don't see him putting his heart into it when he's really letting this woman go and saying that he's in love with her. And I think that's real. And it's the tragic part of all this is, I agree with you that he's a good guy. I think that he's in a bad place, though. I think it's a hurtful place for him. It's a hurtful place for Barbara. And I think it's real. I think it's human. I think it's natural. Don't think it's right, but that's part of what I like about the story is the humanity of it. Like, I still like Jim Gordon, but he'd be one of those friends, like we were having a discussion. If I was having a discussion with him, he'd say, like, dude, you're being a bonehead. And you guys I would be telling him he and his wife should get in counseling. But I also would be thinking to myself, and I don't know if I would be able to vocalize this to him, because a lot of times even saying stuff like this doesn't help anybody. I don't think that relationship can be saved. Once you cross this line, you can't. I think there's people who somehow are lucky enough to get through it, meaning there's a real desire between both members of the relationship, the husband and the wife, to move past it, where they embrace the idea of moving past it and they can get past the cheating thing. But in this case, I don't think Gordon is going back to his wife because he's come to the realization that he loves her and wants to make it work. I think he's going back to his wife because he's come to the realization that she's pregnant. He needs to be a responsible father, and he's trying to do that. And I think there's two distinct differences between the two. I don't know if you agree with, and if you don't agree with me, I think that's perfectly fine. You might be seeing it differently than I do, but I'm looking at that and I'm like, wow, this is like inherently flawed and doomed to fail, and and yet I understand what he's doing, and I agree with what you're saying about him trying to be honorable with what he's doing. So I'm not disputing that theme, but I don't think he's doing it for the purpose that he's trying to really reconcile with his wife and make it work. I think he's doing it because he feels it's the right thing to do, and there's a distinct difference between the two. I don't know if you agree, and if you don't agree with me, please say. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
It's funny because I do want to disagree with you, because I like Gordon so much that I want to see, I want to see stuff in there that I'm not really seeing on paper. The story, the information that's on paper completely supports everything you're saying. That he's not doing it for this honorable intention that I'm throwing out there. That's more out of guilt. It's more out of the fact that his wife's pregnant, he's got a kid, and just all that. But there's just that part of me that looks at Jim Gordon as my friend. And when you start looking at your friends, you do see qualities that aren't actually there. And it's part of the thing that, you're in your mind, you're like, this is my friend. I know they're a good person. They got to be doing it. And you start doing that whole justification for it. We do that a lot of times with our friends, our family, people we respect, admire, politicians, athletes, celebrities, things like that we're like, oh, it's, under stress. Oh, this. And you start making excuses for people, even though if you look at the factual information. So factual information, I'm in agreement with you. Just that, that off-page, in my head thinking process that I have towards Jim Gordon. I'm like, I don't know, Sean. We know Gordon. He's a good guy. He's a stand-up guy. He wouldn't, he's done this. And
you're right. He is a stand-up guy, but he's doing this because he's a stand-up guy, not because he's in love with and motivated to love his wife. There's a distinct difference between the two. The problem is, as a friend, if I was talking to him as a friend, my first question would be, do you love her? And if not, it's like, dude, you've got to really, I guess this is where this is modern me thinking, because my feeling is if an infant's going to be born, it's like you've got to, as a dad, let her have first of all, you got to be there as a dad. You've got to support them financially. You've got to help them. But if you're not in love with her, you've got to help her through the pregnancy. You've got to be there, be the man, and all that stuff. But also let her, for God's sakes, have the opportunity to be with somebody that she's in love with. I'm not a divorced person. I don't believe, in divorce and those type of things. But my parents got divorced and stuff like that, and I think it was the right thing for them to do. I've had friends of mine who've gotten divorced that I thought it was the right thing for them to do. I've also had family members that have stayed together and been married their entire life. I think one of the things that you need to do is, if the relationship's horribly falling, you need to find the right and appropriate time to let that go in a way that's as dignified as possible, so that way the other person can have a chance at happiness. That's sometimes people will stay together for the wrong reasons, and they end up doing hurtful things to each other. On the other hand, if you're committed to really make a relationship work, you need to go to counseling, and you need to both be motivated to find a love in each other. I don't see that here at all in him. And I think he's being the stand-up guy that you're mentioning. But sometimes, there's other ways to be a stand-up guy and maybe give your wife a chance at happiness, instead of setting up a situation where your son might go and grow up to be a lunatic.
Yeah. It happens only in Gotham. But yeah. No.
And I'm very torn on that when a child's involved.
Yeah, I know, and it's a tough thing. Like, I got a friend of mine who both he and his wife come from divorced families. Mm-hmm. Now, on his side of it, that his parents getting divorced was the greatest thing that ever happened. His parents were yelling, fighting, and it was a nasty, very bad living situation. When they got the divorce, they stopped fighting, and they both started becoming actual parents. And the kid, he started having positive relationships with both his father separately and then his mother separately, and he was getting something positive out of each one. And he says, and to this day, this guy will say, hey, the greatest thing that ever happened to my folks was them getting a divorce. Now, his wife, the exact opposite. It really destroyed her family when the divorce happened because of all the nastiness. And it's kind of a situation similar to what we're seeing Gordon and Barbara go through, where there was infidelity, where there was cheating, and then the one goes off and starts a whole new life, and the other one's left with the kids and raising the kids, and just it was a difficult situation for her mom, and it was even something that you see in her as an adult, her dealing with, and everything that she still to date had to deal with. And it was it's kind of interesting that those two people who both families of divorce had complete opposites ended up together, and they're happily married and living their life and just going on. And it's kind of it was funny, I didn't even really think about them until I started we started going through this whole process and started talking about the sequence, and just with Gordon, it rings true to part of the reason why, I don't know, I think I want to support my friend. I want to see everything work out well because I've seen the negative. I've seen the positive. And it's like, I don't know what to do because this is my buddy. I want to help him.
See, I agree with you that I want to support the friend. I'm into that whole thing. If any friend of mine were going through it, first of all, I would never, if it was a friend, I would never sit there and go, hey, dude, you should go get a divorce. Because I think there's so many different variations in a relationship as far as what people can do. I think two people, if they can truly get past the event, but if that event hangs over you like a specter, that thing that you did, that horrid thing that you did, you'll never truly ever be able to get back to a place where you can have a healthy relationship again, if that thing's always there. And I don't think these two as a couple stand a chance in hell of getting past that because of the world they live in, the constant grief of where they live. This is like going to be one more thing that can be held against him, if that makes sense, when they get into an argument or something like that. And I don't know, I love the character as a friend. I get that idea from you as well. But as I'm reading this, I'm just kind of like, dude, you got to let her go. Yeah. I mean, you can't do it right now when she's pregnant, but you somehow got to make that work. Because even after he reveals it to her, you can see that part where the phone call comes in, and she's really, that moment's one more element of humiliation to the whole thing. And she's going to constantly be wondering, would he have ever told me? Because he only told me after this blackmail happened.
And it's the trust thing as well.
Yeah.
She'll always, you always have that thought of, because he did it once before. Anytime he's late coming home from work, is he actually working or is he having an affair again? Anytime he talks about any officer or mentions anything, he can never have a friendship with a female officer again, because she will immediately think he's having an affair. And to be honest, I don't fault her for having that mindset, because it's that whole once a cheat, always a cheat. If he did it to me once before, he can do it again. And especially if he, quote unquote, gets away with it, if she forgives him and they work through it and they stay together, there's a lot of trust issues become huge. And it's the whole play out of, this is my buddy and I don't want to bash him. But in this situation, I would be siding with the wife, 100% with the wife, and I don't know how I would handle I'd like to say I'd do the honorable thing and I'd help out, I'd be on Barbara's corner, but if Gordon's my buddy, if Jim's my friend, if he's my partner, if he's my coworker, I don't know how I would handle it. I don't know if I would have the courage to stand up and say, "Hey, dude, you're doing a bonehead thing here. You need to stop this. You need to fix this. You got a problem here." And I'd like to think I would have that, that character that I would say that, but I can't say for certain.
I love these sequences where we get to see Batman kind of scaling the building, because it goes back to that whole stealth thing that I was talking about. But what I loved about it, that it was Harvey Dent releasing somebody so Batman could interrogate them. But I like that this was off camera. And this was another example of, I thought that the comic told us a little bit more than the film did. Because I don't remember, getting this much with Harvey. I know we saw Harvey in the film, but I felt like we got more of him, and maybe that's my own mental illusion. But I don't remember this playing out exactly the same way in the film as it did in the comic. But again, that's maybe my own perception and illusion, because I just particularly like the way this played out in the comic.
No, I agree with you. I think you did see Bruce scaling the side of the building, but I think there was more inferred as to why Harvey released, why Harvey released Skeevers, as opposed to what we get more of it played out, and you really see and understand what's going on in the comic. The movie did let you know what was going on with it, but I think the comic really laid it out a little bit better. And again, this was another sequence I really enjoyed in the comic. Now, there's some really cool Batman beatdown sequences, and you got to love, the intimidation. You got to love the fear. You got to love just everything how it played out in the movie, that physical side of it. But there was some, I'm quoting with you how with seeing him scaling the side of the buildings, and you have the side, that's the main page of him scaling. Then you have the other smaller panels of him dealing with his attorney. So it's overlapped on top of each other. Something they couldn't do in the animated. They could do a cut scene where he's climbing and then a scene with the attorney. The physical comic, you have those two overlapping at the same time. And I thought that, for me, was a cool visual element and a cool layout of the page.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I loved the visual elements of all this. This is another example of where I've come to appreciate this time around color work, because I don't know if minimalist is the right word for it. There's some times where they will make a choice, a colorist will make a choice to say, you know what, we're only going to use a certain color palette here because we're trying to build a tone and a darkness and a mood, and it's funny how, I guess and this shows where my own artistic limitations are, I think if I was trying to do this, I'd be using every color imaginable. I'd overdo it, and I think a real artist, a real colorist, knows when to say, you know what, this is what's needed here. And I'm sure, I don't know if they do that in collaboration with the penciler or, Frank Miller or however they do it. But, even when you see the scenes of the room, when they're inside, they're having this discussion that Bruce is witnessing about Flass, and you see it all going on. There's a lot of your purple tones that are in there that are predominant to the whole scene, with very few other colors coming to the forefront. I like that. There's something about that works in the Bat books, that when an artist really knows how to use it, and it's a blatant shift from the page before, as far as in the coloring theme and the idea and behind color work. And I don't know, there was something about it that I just really enjoyed how that all played out. I know one of the purposes is to give the appearance of night, but internally, inside the room even, it just works really, really well. That when you shift to something different, like when, she's out in the hallway, that viewpoint is so drastically, shockingly in your face different that it sets aside those sequences when Batman's doing that interrogation on him. That just, I find it killer. I just think it was just a really interesting set of color work. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you, I never really paid attention to that much the previous times when I've read it. It was this time through, and I really think that I owe that to the kind colorists that have come onto our show over the years that we've been doing this podcast, who've kind of educated me with their own philosophy and how they do it, because I admit my own ignorance to, how they come to the decisions that they do. A lot of that stuff, I think, just is in the background for me, and they do their job so well where they bring emotion and tone to me that I don't realize is there. I noticed it this time. And I don't know if you've had that same experience with it. It just was something that, in particular, this issue, I was like, wow, I really liked the color work in this issue and what it did for me on the tone end. And sometimes the choices to pull back and choose one palette instead of going for something, and I don't know if I'm even using the right terminology, but I really appreciated the choices that were made in this.
Yeah, the heavy reds and purple focus kind of adds to that, the energy or the moments that was going on there. And even when because you talk about the sequence where his attorney's in there, she leaves, she hears the crash and goes back. What the heck? Are you all right? Just her sequence has the normal color pattern, and then it goes down to the interrogation, then back to the normal color pattern. Just how that really accentuated made it pop, like what is going on in that room? What craziness is happening in there that this is the normal color pattern? Or is this how this guy is seeing life because he's so high as a freaking kite? Maybe that's also part of it. Maybe there's a little bit more going on here, and just everything, adds to it and plays on. This is another, I love the dialogue. I love just how this came out. You can never escape me. Bullets don't harm me. Nothing harms me. But I know pain. I know pain. Sometimes I share it with someone like you. Classic yes. Batman intimidation, man.
Yes. And it played out so well. I really, really loved everything about that sequence. I just thought it was really, really terrific. Now, we finally get to see this guy go in and cop a plea, which shows the intimidation factor that Batman has. But this leads to that sequence where it's finally like, okay, Gordon, you want to do this? You want to go over our head and bring in Flash and operate as a free agent? We got to reel you in now. And they were waiting with that info. They were waiting to use that when they needed it. It's an interesting thing about some of my favorite bad guys. What makes them good bad guys is when you realize that they're smart. They're smarmy, they're awful, and there's times where they just, disgust you and they're despicable. But then they'll do something like this where you're like, they were smart enough to know not to use it until it was time. Those are scarier bad guys to me. I don't know why. I think it's just because you never see them coming. Gordon didn't see this coming. That to me is a lot creepier than sometimes a superpower. And I don't know if you feel that way, but this type of stuff for me really gives an interesting creep factor. That these are the kind of villains that I want to see taken down because I think that there's a different kind of danger with them because it's so under the table and you don't know what they're doing. That I particularly like seeing these villains defeated because I think they're scarier.
Oh, God, yeah. And I do like the shock look on Gordon's face as they're playing it out, and then just that smarmy look as they're standing there showing, like, this is what we got. The walls have ears. The walls have ears, Jimmy. I just love just that look on their face, because, again, granted, Gordon's my friend, so I feel bad for him that he got caught, but you gotta love these. You gotta love a villain that knows how to play the game, that knows how to drop, this right here. This is their atom bomb. They're dropping it on them. They now are going to keep Super Cop in line with this. Of course, Gordon being Gordon, he does work around it, but you got to look at how much damage he caused in his own life just because he had to deal with this, because this all played out.
Yeah. And there's something about that I think is just really interesting. I like creepy villains that are like real world and that kind of thing, especially when there's like a gang of them that are protecting each other. They would stab each other back in an instant. This bit with the drive up to Wayne's, I liked what they did in the film where you had the dialogue between Jim and his wife driving up to Wayne Manor.
Yeah.
You had that bit where she, ooh, Bruce Wayne, I've always wanted to meet Bruce Wayne and that type of stuff, and they were kind of giving their commentary on who they thought that he was. I like, there's things in the animated feature that they did where they expanded stuff like that I thought was really, really cool. And then we had this sequence that, in the film, they did that where he did the cross leg, almost like a Basic Instinct kind of thing. Yeah. Just to add the further shock value that I thought was really cleverly done in the film. I honestly think this sequence won out in the film for me because of the fact that they just went a little bit further with it and added a little bit more details to it. I'm not saying this was in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a terrific sequence right here. But there's certain moments, like in this, where they added a little something that I thought was really great in the animated feature.
Yeah, and I like the fact that in the animated feature, how we get the explanation as to why Barbara was there. Because that was something with, you get in the comic, I was initially thrown, okay, why is she there? Why would she go with him? Well, they kind of explain it, and you really understood why she was present. And then, of course, obviously, story-wise, this point is the point that leads into him confessing everything to her and laying everything out. But it was a little something that, again, I was doing a lot of comparison between the animated and the comic, and I liked how that played out. This was some great, cool dialogue, some cool inner dialogue, and just everything played out. But this was a nice physical flow-through in the animated that I really enjoyed, and this was one of those sequences like, oh, that was kind of cool. I liked seeing just the Playboy act, and just especially how heavy he was laying it on, and how believable he was, and just how it fit just second nature, and everything just seemed like, okay, yeah, I could see somebody falling for this. I could see somebody not thinking that he is Batman because of what he's laying out.
The sequence where, I want to reference it again, when you see her at the phone. Yes, sir, I know about Sergeant Essen. Please don't bother me again. Like, it's funny with that type of thing. Once you've revealed it, you've lost all power.
Yeah. Well, you think Letterman did that? Yeah, Letterman did that with when he was being blackmailed.
Right.
If you're being blackmailed, the blackmailers will never stop. They will never, even if they say you do this, this, and this, will stop, they never will. And if they say, we'll give you the pictures, they always have backups. The only thing you can do is remove the leverage. Take them down and, take out that thing that they're holding over their head. And that's part of the reason why I do hold on to the fact that Gordon would have eventually told his wife, even if he hadn't been caught. There's still something he would still have known. I got to get this out. I got to end this. I can't just leave this hair hanging and dangling. I can't. I'm reaching for my friend. I'm reaching for what I want him to do. What I think what's the right thing to do. Would he actually do it? I don't know. The physical evidence we're getting in the book, would say that no, he wouldn't, that he really only told his wife because of the blackmail. But there is guilt. You do see him racked with guilt from the very beginning of the affair, from the very beginning moment that he realizes he has feelings for Essen. You see that guilt. So eventually I would like to think that the guilt would have gotten to him and he would have confessed to her. But again, it's confession based on guilt, not based on love. Confession based on, I got to get this off my chest, as opposed to, this is the right thing to do. So I want to back my friend, but the evidence that they're putting in here, which is a great way they're laying it out, don't get me wrong, it doesn't imply that, the positiveness that I want to see in my friend exists.
Yeah. This leads to that great Catwoman Batman sequence of events where she's trying to be the cat burglar and get like her own kind of reputation going, and she keeps getting billed as being Batman's sidekick and things like that, which I thought was really, really great. I also loved seeing the glider here.
Yeah.
To me, I'm a fan of the Bat gadgets that give him kind of those shadows in the night sky, like he's some kind of beast, some kind of creature of the night, because it adds to the legends, the stories, that somebody looking up at the night sky and seeing something like that swooping down would then have the legacy, Batman can fly, and he swoops on in and, attacks his prey, and those type of things that you hear so often in Gotham. When you see that in the shadows, that when that first sequence with it in the shadows, you get it. Then you do the zoom up and you see the actual artwork of what we're dealing with there, which is also equally great. I love the things that look like it's something out of Da Vinci's work or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of, that adds a timeless factor to it as well for some reason for me. When you go back to stuff like that and they look like working gadgets that somebody could have. I've always been a fan of the evolution of the Bat gadget. Where they're still real world feel, but like they're always one step ahead of anything we could have. And there's something, I don't know, I just really enjoy and find neat about that.
Yeah, one of the sequences I kind of liked, that again, we're talking about just the origin and birth of these characters and development of them, is when Selina first hits the Commissioner, and she gets his pop cultural memorabilia, and she's like, oh, this is just junk. Now, Yeah, I could understand someone would think it's just junk, but a more experienced cat burglar, a more experienced thief would know, okay, I can sell some of this stuff. I can find a buyer for this. I can move this stuff because, there is a collectability in it. There is something. Even the book, I think, said it was valued at like $40,000. And the Selena, the experienced cat burglar, would have known, okay, I can make a pretty penny off. I can make some quick money off of this.
Where? She asked the question, where?
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, because it's in this era. Where would she have sold it? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm curious.
Well,
I'm curious to how you're working that through.
Well, you think about it, if the more experienced cat burglar would have their fences, would have their connections.
Okay.
Pop culture memorabilia, you got your various other collectors, you got your other dealers, heck, even pawn shops, you can make a quick buck. If this is valued at 40, she could have easily have gotten 10 for it.
Yeah.
So that's 10 grand in her pocket, that she didn't have before. And this Selena, 10 grand would be a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
you're right.
there's a lot of other connections she could have gone through, but she's new at the game. She doesn't know what to do. Heck, she's ripping the heads off of this priceless collection of memorabilia. You're like, okay, well, now that's ruined. And Holly's like, it doesn't even work. Who knows what she's done and how she's broken it? So they've completely taken anywhere between 10 and 40 grand and just threw it out the window because they didn't know what they had. And I like the fact that as this is playing out, Catwoman is also, she's developing and she's getting it working and she's trying to figure out who her place is and what she's about.
Gradually becoming the girl we see in Long Halloween. And that comparison's perfect here because I love how much this story is a part of Long Halloween, which I thought was a really, really stellar story.
Oh, God, yeah. Big time.
They built off of this mythos, which is great. I'd love to see them eventually at some point in time, if they have a story still in them, revisit this era again, moving it forward. Because that whole Calendar Man stuff they did with that, I think was great. But when you see these sequences with the Roman, it so feels like it's right out of that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. He is just a great mob boss villain. Batman needs his Jokers, his Riddlers, his Penguins, his thing, but he does need this type of villain. He does need these mob bosses. He does need these quote unquote normal people. People like this. Superman wouldn't really deal with this guy. Superman could very easily deal with this guy, but that's not the level of the crime. That's not the level of what Superman does. He goes for the superhuman stuff that the regular everyday cop can't deal with. Whereas Bruce is getting down and dirty. Bruce is in the trenches. He's going after the mob bosses because they're part of the corruption of Gotham. This is about the redemption and protection of his city. This is about fixing what's wrong with Gotham. This isn't about a global plan. This isn't about a global hope or any of that. This is about hope in this city. And he knows he's got to get down and dirty. He's got to figure out what's going on with these guys. And I love that's the difference between those characters. But even at these beginning stages, Bruce is going after these people. This is the kind of villain that Batman has to fight.
I like when this leads to that really cool motorcycle sequence where Bruce realizes what's up, that there's a danger, and he dons on his regular street clothes, saying he can't be Batman during the day, and leads Gordon through the high-speed chase back to the garage. There was something about that whole sequence following what happened with Selena. We're starting to see Bruce become more experienced in dealing with his world in and out of the costume. And moving things, because this is where I think earlier sequences where we see him covering his trail, using, the ski stuff and all that type of thing, he's picking up tools of the trade that are making him more effective. And he's learning how to guide people where he wants them to go to accomplish the things that he needs them to do. In this case, leading Gordon to his family before they have a chance to be totally kidnapped. So that that actually, those split seconds that Gordon helped delay things, put Bruce in a position where he could help Gordon out.
Yeah, and this was a sequence that I really liked Yeah, it's funny, the lead up to it with Bruce and Wayne Manor. I like the comic book better than how they handled it live, because it felt like they got more of the dialogue, more of the understanding, like the Alfred's one-liners that he's throwing out there about marked increased paranoia, the concerns the effects of lack of sleep among the marginally insane. Quiet, Alfred. It just the little banter and little knickknacks going back and forth between Bruce and Alfred, I think played out better in the comic. But then we get the physical sequences right after this that I was like, that was a really cool visual element. The book did a great job of giving us that feel of action, giving us that feel of flow, but there was something about physically seeing the movement, seeing Bruce go in, and Gordon seeing his rearview mirror, and wait a minute, something's not right there. He's going into my apartment building, and the instinct of that instinct of his to quickly turn around and head back in. I love just seeing how, again, the great play between Bruce and Gordon, even Bruce out of the costume, you still get those moments of those working together as a team. You get the true cop in Gordon, where he notices something wrong. He goes in the move. He sees the people have his kids. He goes, they leave here, they're dead. I'm taking the shot. And he takes the shot. He's not afraid to drop the guy because he knows he needs to do that to protect his family. I loved seeing how that played out.
I agree with you. And I think the partnership role and all that, there's a development here of where you're starting to see, without him knowing, a feeling out process between them that maybe never was spoken. Although I guess Barbara would have shared the story and Gordon would have put two and two together.
Yeah.
Which I guess is more the preferable way that I'm taking it. I love that Batman gets out of 10 speed.
And he keeps up. Hey,
he does.
Well, he's Batman.
And he can kick down trees. So imagine what he can do with those feet when it comes to pedals.
Now, the one thing that I do think about off page is the whole sequence with Barbara. When, first off, how much blame is she going to lay on Gordon because they tried to kidnap her and the kid? Mm-hmm. And then two, when he's shooting and she gets down, and we get that cool dialogue. He's like, "Good, Barbara, stay down. Don't present yourself as a high target." Is there going to be that conversation between the two of them where she goes, "Hey, you were shooting at me. I was standing right there. What were you thinking?" Well, and it just because that's a situation where no guy could talk his way out of it. He could literally say, "No, you were down, you were safe. It was a much better spot. I had the clean shot." But in her mind, she may have locked in her head, "I was standing there and my husband was shooting." There could be. I could just imagine just the conversation, the dialogue that could possibly happen after all of this sequence, everything that happened, and this could be something that could bring them together or could drive them farther and farther apart. And that's the stuff I would love to see, the direct ramifications of this confrontation, of this shootout, of this fight sequence. Where does that play in the Barbara and Jim Gordon relationship?
Especially with what happens with the son. I think that's the most pivotal moment. To me, I agree with everything you're saying. Extra emphasis on the fact that what happened to the son, as a couple, I don't know that you can ever fully recover from that.
Yeah, that's a toughie. It's one of those moments of you have to make the decision. What's it going to be? Are you going to fight for the family? Are you going to, is this the end? Because being shot at, having your kid get thrown off the side of having the kid get kidnapped, having the kid then get thrown off the side of the bridge. These are stuff that any sane and rational person would say, "Hey, okay, there's a limit to in good times and bad." Yeah. I think we've crossed that limit. Gunshots, kidnapping, and being thrown off the side of a bridge. That's the limit right there. I gotta walk away from this situation. Or do you hold on to it, saying, "No, together we can work through this"?
Yeah, that becomes a really tough part for a couple. Where do you go? Because they've got on top of it all the other things that have come before. The forced move, which I'm assuming meant that he only had very limited career options afterwards, with being blackballed and such.
Yeah, I think Gotham was his only hope. And
I think they were looking for somebody with his potential background of having problems as being somebody they could control.
Yeah, well, they saw Gordon as somebody who was more desperate, somebody who would look the other way, and just okay, this is a guy, he's been bit before, he'll play ball. We don't have to worry about him. Plus, he's a good cop, so maybe he can do of the crimes that we let him solve, he can handle those. Or, just, see if he plays ball. And that was the whole thing with the beginning of the issues where they're fleshing him out. They're seeing how he fits. Hey, Jimmy, take it easy. There's cops are, this is a good gig here in Gotham. This is a good place to be a cop. Just, kind of, see how he handles it, see how he plays it out. And I thought that was a great handling of the corruption. And just, again, this was a beautiful flow through of Gordon's getting adjusted to what it takes to be a cop in Gotham, what it takes to dealing with the corruption, what it takes to dealing with this life.
I like the way that the ending turns out of this one. And what I like about that page is you see, like, Dent having the opportunity to get all the evidence that he wants. Flass was smarter than anybody thought. He had, have documented evidence on everybody, including the commissioner. And it's not enough in this corrupt world. The commissioner is able to sneak away quietly and then, set himself up in a position where he just resigns versus any other further action being taken, which is a best possible scenario for him in this case. But this leads to Gordon now. He's finally become a captain, and all of this has led to him feeling more like he's found his place, and you see him smiling there again, and being in a place where he can start making a bat signal and making that choice of saying, hey, now that I've got this ally who I can trust, this guy who I'm guessing, do you think Gordon knows at this point that he saved the kid? Batman?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he knows that was Batman.
Well, we know he does because he's sitting there. You must be wearing some armor under that jacket. Yes. I'm practically blind without my glasses. Siren's coming, you better go. He knows right there and then that's him.
Yeah, he knows. And I think that was, again, it's that cool nod to how much does Gordon know? He's saying he's practically blind without his glasses. All right, but how blind is he really? Because the one sequence we see when he's shooting in the range, he's wearing his glasses, but even, the glasses, you can't be blind as a bat without if you lose your glasses and still be a cop. There are vision limitations because you pose a great, you pose a larger risk on yourself, on other officers, if something as simple as knocking your glasses off make you completely ineffective. So how much does Gordon actually be able to see? How much does he know of Bruce's face? Now, throughout history, it's always been argued, does he know, does he not know? Where's this at? And I always like the fact that he's saying that he's blind, he can't see without the glasses, but there is that question in the back of my head. And I love the fact that there is that question in my head, does he know? Does he not know?
Yeah. There's always that. Well, that's always, I think, kind of true of that relationship in general. What does he or does he not know? I don't know. I particularly loved how it played out here. This was a great series to revisit again. I was so pleasantly surprised that, for myself, I have trouble choosing between the film and the original comic work. I guess I'm like you in the sense that I give, I think, a little bit more edge to the comic work, only because I think any of the things that I find a little more advantageous because they were extended out in the animated feature wouldn't have extended themselves out or been a part of it at all if it wasn't for this original work being written, which I think just holds up on just such a stellar level. So a slight edge to the original work, but that's not detracting from either pieces because I just think together they make for the best experience, at least for me.
Yeah, and I know in our last recording we talked about the fact that if you've only read one, see the movie. If you've only seen the movie, read the book. This is something that I give the edge to the comic, probably a little bit stronger edge than you're giving it, but we're both in agreement that these are two really great complementary things to each other. And if you can do it, I would recommend reading and then watching, or watching then reading right away. Try to have the time it so you can fit both of those two in at the same time, because that, I think, was I really enjoyed it that way. When I went right from the physical reading right into the movie, everything's fresh and I'm seeing it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is, it really brought it to life, and it really accentuated the stuff that I knew that was going on that happened in the book. I knew and I saw it in the movie. I'm like, oh, okay, what they didn't put in there, I was able to fit in my head. But, you still get that focus on that physical presence in front of you. It was a great complement to each other.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I don't know, just a great series. I'm glad we had the chance to talk about this one. I'm actually looking very forward to following this up, to finally getting a chance to talk about Dark Knight Returns.
Yes.
Which is probably, it's on my short list of comic events that I've wanted to talk about on this podcast since we've started it over the last 7 years.
I think we talked about doing Dark Knight Returns. When we first started, it was going to be one of the big numbers. We were going to do Dark Knight Returns, I thought.
Well, we're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, only, 350 shows
350
later?
instead of like 100.
Yeah, but that shows you how many good stories we've got to get to.
Great molecules! They're programming the computers for a chain reaction to blow up that atomic pile!
Hey, Sean, Jim, it's Bruce Rosenberger. 350 episodes. Holy moly. I mean, we're not talking like 15-minute episodes here. We're talking like blockbusters. 350 blockbusters. Probably about, I don't know, what's 3 times 350? That's 900, 1150, or no, wait, 1050. Yeah, I'm really good at math, But, wow, I mean, that's amazing, because, like, if I get around to putting one out, it might be 15 or 20 minutes, but, that's it. But, 3-hour shows, 2 3-hour shows, 350 of them in all these years that you guys have been going. Congratulations. I'm stunned. I'm amazed. I'm thrilled to hear it. Congratulations, guys.
Bruce Rosenberger is one of these guys that, like, when we were getting started podcasting, there's people who encouraged me and helped me through the whole podcasting process when I had questions and just advice on how to make a good podcast. And anything that's good about this show comes from people like Bruce Rosenberger really helping me behind the scenes. So if you enjoy this show, Bruce is one of the reasons why. And he's a guy, he was doing Comics Cast back then. But Bruce really was one of the guys that taught me that this is a community of podcasters and that we all, should be friends and help each other out. And it's great to see each other when we meet up and things like that. He's done the Comics Podcast crossover, which is funny. We were at the CGS Super Show and we were talking about how it'd be great to do something like that again. But if you didn't have guys like him providing that kind of interconnectivity between us, that kind of stuff wouldn't happen. Bruce is really one of my mentors in podcasting. There was a lot of them when I was getting started, and they were really special people, and Bruce is one of those guys who has remained a friend and somebody who I look up to. So I'm glad that I have an opportunity. First of all, I want to thank Bruce for sending us a clip to celebrate our anniversary, but I've been very lucky in the time that I've been podcasting that I've made friends like Bruce Rosenberger. So it was great to have him part of this.
How's it going, guys? Sean, Jim. It's Brandon calling again out of New Orleans. I actually got a kind of weird call today. I'm kind of in a weird place with DC. I'm usually pretty positive up with you guys. I'm wondering what's going on over there, man, with all the changes they got going on with the Green Lantern. I'm kind of concerned that they don't know where they want to go right now. It's got me worried about my universe, actually, especially, like the Batman titles. They seem to, like, they keep canceling books. I, Vampire is another one I found out, just ended on the chopping block, and that one really kind of hit me because I've been following that one from the beginning. It's one of my my dabbles into the strange world that I've loved, and I know we're getting some new content like Constantine and stuff like that. I haven't checked it out yet, but I guess I've never really been too into Constantine the character, and I don't know what they're doing. They've got the writers that seemed pretty ambitious going forward with the Green Lantern title. They had like a whole idea. I guess they sounded like they had cut out with that universe with the writer that was going to take on the Red Lanterns and the Green Lantern Corps, and he's jumped off board. And then they had Tony Daniel jump off board the Superman title. And you're getting another title now with Batman and Superman, and it seems to be their first meeting, which is, it's cool. I love that stuff, the buddies meeting up. But I just don't know where they're going with it, because especially being in the past, and we all know that we're getting Batman Year Zero with Scott Snyder now, which is also going to take part in the past, which, you know, I'm excited for. I love, again, but it's familiar territory, and all the other titles like Nightwing and Batgirl, they're going to be focusing out of Gotham City. So it seems like for the next year, we're going to be out of the present in the New 52. And it just seems kind of weird to me now, because we did this New 52 thing for new stories, and we're coming on board for a new universe. And now that we seem to be hitting the stride with it, you know, we had Deaths of the Family, we had Court of Owls, where we were going full steam ahead. And now it seems to be jolting to a halt and going backwards, especially, like I said, with the Green Lantern titles. Jeff Jones was doing some great things over there. And I don't want to cut off the new writers before they jump on board, but it just seems, you know, especially with one jumping off of that universe, there's a lot of shakeup, and I'm really concerned about it. I want to know how do you guys feel, and what are your thoughts about it? You know, especially, like I said, with my favorite part of the universe being the Batman universe, the main title that everybody, of course, loves is the Batman title, and it's going to be in the past. You've got the new story that's going to be set in the past. Of course, you're still going to have Detective and the Dark Knight, which I'm so glad have gotten so much better, but I don't know where they're going to be going forward with that one, if they're going to be kind of halting it too, because it just seems like they're kind of pausing the universe and trying to figure out where they're going, at least from my perspective, and it really worries me. But I don't know, maybe this is all something to do with the Trinity Wars coming up. I don't know. Speculations are not my strong suit, but I'm really worried about my company right now, and I want to know what you guys think. Do you have any concerns? Because I know you're pretty positive on most things, and like I said, I like to try and stay pretty positive, but at the moment, it just seems to have been a lot of things going on at DC that they don't know where they want to go, and so they're halting their main universe in the Batman titles until I guess they can figure it out and go forward from there. What are your thoughts? Anyway, guys, great job on the show, and I'll talk to you later.
That's actually a really common question that we get on the show is when announcements come out and news come out about behind-the-scenes stuff, how do we feel about that? Here's part of the thing. I've learned since I was a kid that when there's changes in the universe, I'll go back to the class. I know I threw out this Man of Steel story that John Byrne did years ago. The reason why I throw that out there is because that was a huge change at the time for Superman. And we didn't have kind of the internet speculation that we have today with it. So it was just comic shop talk. And, you know, the question at that time was mainly how are people feeling then when they read it? So I learned, I guess, as a kid to, when new things happen and new writers come on, to read the story first and then decide how I feel. Let's go back to when the New 52 started. When the New 52 started, there was going to be a major shift in the universe, which led to a lot of creative changes. Books being canceled or being reimagined in a way that caused a shift. Now, here's what happened for me with that. I'm still loving the same amount of DC titles that I loved before. When I say loving, I'm talking about my top tier amount of titles, because the way books work for me, they work into like 3 different categories. I have the blow my mind away, fantastic top tier books, which are the books I'm talking about right now. I have the middle ground books, which are books that they're good, they're enjoyable reads. And then I have books where I'm digging reading them, but they aren't grabbing me on the same level as the other ones. And they're not bad books. It may be just that arc, you know, where I'm reading that arc, I'm kind of like, you know, this is a good arc. I can kind of wait on it. And, you know, if a couple issues pile up, great. And, you know, I'll eventually catch up to it. And I usually enjoy when I catch up to it. But if I had to cut down on my reading, those would be the books I'd start with. You know, so it's not that they're bad books. They're just, you know, and they might be somebody else's favorite title. What happened when the New 52 started is those books shifted. You know, it's my favorite top-tier books. Some of them are the same ones as before. You mentioned Scott Snyder's Batman. Well, I loved his Detective Comics run, so when he jumped on Batman, it was kind of a natural transition. But that meant that Batman was the title. But then books that he was doing like Swamp Thing and stuff like that, I started to get really, really interested. I'm a fan of Gail Simone, so then Batgirl's, you know, knocking it out of the park, and I'm digging that book. But, you know, those are shifts. Aquaman, you know, was like this amazing thing that came, I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere. I wanted this Aquaman since Blackest Night, when Mira was taking center stage, and we got to see him back again in Brightest Day. So this is something that I expected and wanted, but it was great to have it pay off on the level where we're getting that. And Justice League, is at an amazing level. But those shifts happen from time to time, and books will do that. Cancellations, those are kind of a tricky thing. First of all, iVampire, why is it being canceled? Sales numbers. I mean, that's why those books get canceled. I love iVampire too, so I'm with you in the sense that I'm not happy about that book being canceled. I'm glad they put it out, though, for a lot of the reason that you're talking about, because it's a great read, and if they hadn't put it out, I wouldn't have had a chance to have an opportunity with that title. So I'm really digging it. So I get your point there. And when that happens, when a book that I'm enjoying is canceled, I'm going to go back to a series that I dug that I don't know if a lot of people here did. A couple of them. I really liked the series The Shield when DC had acquired those characters. And it was a short-lived series, but the artwork was amazing and the story was really great. And, it was really, they incorporated the art style in a way where I felt like I was inside the head of the character, and it just was really different. I really enjoyed, they did a new launch on Vigilante. And these were titles that, they sold in smaller numbers, but they were really interesting, unique books to me. And I guess it kind of fits into this iVampire category. So I'm always sad when those are canceled, but I've learned for a long time, and Manhunter is another one I'll throw out there, that were titles that I think had a fan following that were really devoted to the series, but it never caught on to the mainstream fans. And that just kind of happens from time to time, so those books get canceled. The changes behind the scenes, particularly you mentioned Action Comics and the Green Lantern books, I'm with you on that. That stuff bothers me only because I'm worried about, first of all, where those creators, because I was interested in seeing them, and we talk about Andy Diggle on this one, so actually this is a very appropriate timing-wise. We talk about his first issue on Action Comics, and I'm really sad to see him not going further on that series other than it looks like maybe these couple issues that are coming up. But I really enjoyed what he did for his initial offering with Tony Daniel on art. I think it was really a very satisfying read. So I don't know, when that kind of stuff happens, I'm first of all curious to where those creators are going to go because they've delivered something for me that excites me. And then second of all, it's who are they going to put on the book to make sure the book works? And there's creative teams on there that really, have a direction for it going forward. I don't pretend to know everything that goes on behind the scenes in comics. I'm a fan. I want to read the books, and I want to read quality books. My hope is that whatever decision they make doesn't destroy Action Comics, and that I have an opportunity to read the creators that left that book that are going somewhere else. So it's kind of a twofold thing for me on that, just because I care about the book and I care, about, the character, but I also care about the creators. So I'm kind of, as I mentioned, I'm kind of a hybrid person that way. So that's kind of where I fall on that one. The Bat books, I actually don't have an issue with it taking place in the past, because since the New 52 has started, a lot of people have been, including myself, have been questioning what exactly is part of Batman's history, and we're going to get some of that. And this is a story that Snyder's always wanted to tell. If you get worried about the Scott Snyder book taking place in the past and think that that's some kind of crazy lack of confidence in the New 52, read some of the interviews online with Snyder about this storyline and why he's doing it and what it is for him. And I think you'll get a lot more confident in that. I don't think it's an issue of there being something or they're losing their way. I was a big fan of, if you take a look at the classic Batman Year One storyline, that took place in the main Batman title. And when that was going on, that put that book, in the past for the issues that it took place in. This sounds like it's a story that Snyder's always wanted to tell, and that, I think, was one of the edicts of the New 52, is to be able to tell unique and interesting new stories about these characters. So, I don't have a problem with a story in the past. I don't feel that it always has to be present day. And actually, I would think because we're in the New 52 now, they never do that, that limitation to me would be really harmful to what I think any comic company should be doing, and that's delivering creative stories that are driven by, hey, wow, will this knock the socks off of the fans? And that really should be a part of it. And will it do something moving forward with the character? Jeff Johns did a series of Secret Origin titles, and what they were is they took place in the main title. And you might have read some of these, so if I'm being redundant to you, I apologize. But for anybody listening, just so they know what I'm talking about, they took place in the main title. They took place in the character's past, but what they did was they told a story on some levels that we already knew, but they added something new to the mythos that then could be brought into present day. And then that present day thing had a high impact for the character because we got to witness the history of it with the character. So who knows? Scott Snyder might be doing something like that and establishing tools that he can then use for his groundwork. So I don't know. My take is right now that I'm still as excited about all of the titles that I'm reading that are being written by my favorite creators that are currently on them. So Batman, is a great example of a title I'm still excited about. I think the Bat family in general, I'm not seeing anything coming down the pipeline that I'm not excited about. If I start reading issues where, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, this book feels like it's lost away, then it's a different conversation. But until I've read it that way, I don't have a problem. Other than the sense that you're right, behind the scenes there seems to be some crazy stuff going on, and I get that. So I'm not oblivious to that, and I'm not ignoring that. But there's a huge difference between that and does it bother me? Not until I see it turn out that way in the books where there's a problem. It's that's kind of where I'm at on a take-wise. I always like to give, because, see, here's the way I look at it. I'm very sad for the creative teams that it didn't work out for, and I want to follow them to their projects, so I'm supporting them. But at the same time, the new creators that are coming in, those are also comic book creators that are looking for a job and looking to make a creative mark. So, I'm not going to throw them under the bus because they were kind of thrust into a situation. I'm going to give them an open-minded chance. If they don't deliver, it's a different story. That's like where I said earlier, where some of my favorite books will sometimes have a shift. So I hope that makes sense. Do I get worried? Yeah. Do I let it overtake me? No, because, ultimately I found that it'll usually pay off. I hope in Action Comics' case, boy, I would not want to follow up what they're currently doing in Action. But, if you get a special creator on there who does it, yeah. I don't know who the Action Comics creative team is. I've seen speculation on it, and maybe I saw some announcements on it, but I think I'm so caught up in what's currently going on that I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to it on that end. So I hope that helps. Good question. It's really a good question. I don't know if that answers, and I know Jim's in a similar place to what I am. Jim, I do think, tends to worry more than I do, though. So Jim actually might be a little closer to you on it, to be fair, because anytime we've talked about it on the show before, anybody who's listened for a long time, I think will say, yeah, Jim tends to say he's a little bit more worried, and it's the truth. So, and I don't think there's a wrong answer there.
How's it going, Sean and Jim? This is Brandon calling out in New Orleans again. Just wanted to give a call out and talk about something that was just so incredible this week. Arrow returned, and I know we've all had a couple of discussions. A couple other people I know have called in about the show and talked about how amazing it is. And it's been gone for about 2 months. It's the one show me and my girl actually completely agree on, and we can't wait to watch it every week when it comes on. So we were thoroughly excited this week when it came back and watching it. Man, I wanted to bring up some points of why I think this show is amazing, and the writing in it and the steps that it's taken to become just a great series, I think, in general, from what it was in the beginning. The episode title was Home Invasion, and there was a family that Laurel was helping. Spoilers, of course, we all know this is a spoiler show. A family that Laurel was helping, and they were taken out, except for a kid. And the kid saw the guy's face who was going to take them out. And, of course, Laurel stepped up to protect them, which we all know means Ollie stepped up to protect them, because anything that's important to Laurel is important to Ollie. And this show, like I said, it shows from how it changed from the very beginning to Ollie trying to find himself and wasn't sure of who he needed to be around people, and the image he needed to portray, not only as the vigilante or the hood or the 50 other nicknames that they've given him on the show, but also in his own personal endeavors, and especially with Laurel. They had a couple of episodes where he went back and forth with her, and it was a very trying period to the way he's become now, and he's showing himself and his sincerity around her, and it's growing their relationship. And at the same time, splintering his and Tommy's. Man, what a way to see these friends fall. You wanted to know in the beginning what was going to happen. You were all curious. Was he going to be good, evil? And it's still up in the air. But man, to see the journey is it's amazing with them two. And let's talk about the scene on the island where he was being trained by the daughter. I just thought it was such an incredible. They keep tying things back to old episodes, and that's one thing I love about the writing of the show, how amazing it is. There was a scene where she was trying to teach him to use the bow and arrow, and she grabs it away from him and goes and starts shooting all the targets. And if you recall, that's exactly what he did with Helena in the Huntress episode. And there was a kiss that happened after that. Same thing with Helena. It's interesting to see the way that they're harkening back, and that they're doing all these things to tie into what these situations would really do to you. And of course, we see that Ollie ultimately chooses Laurel, which is me and my girlfriend had a debate over the big decision in the show. It comes to the point to where Ollie's supposed to help Diggle with his journey, with Deadshot. He's had this thing going on for 6-7 episodes now, trying to find Deadshot. And instead of going to help Diggle, he chooses to help Laurel and go and stop this guy at the last chance, which my girlfriend says was the right decision. I completely disagree. And I also agree that the decision that Ollie made is it's what makes him human. It's what makes him a good character. He's flawed. He didn't necessarily make a bad or wrong decision, you would say. I mean, like I said, my girl thinks he made the right one. I think he made the wrong one. It all depends on your opinion of the situation. I think he should have helped his friend out and everybody was safe. But that flashback showed that, he made that decision because everything else, everybody else be damned. Laurel is the one, Laurel's his guiding light in everything. So he made that decision for Laurel. And, of course it causes him and Diggle to finally splinter. But, man, the big fight in the end, the finale, the climax of the episode, this guy, the hired gun, I guess you could call him, for the whole episode. He's quite a creepy actor, actually. He did a great part. He played a very sincere and genuine guy, and almost happy in moments, and then very sadistic in other moments. But they have a great fight scene in the mansion at the end, and there's this moment where they're fighting, and they come to this grip handlock, and he looks at him, Ollie, and goes, "What happened to you on that island?" And Ollie goes, "You're about to find out," and bam, throws himself off the staircase. Incredible. But the reason I'm mentioning this scene in particular, I think a lot of people I heard in the beginning complain about, well, how would this guy in the span of 5 years learn to become this superhero, this vigilante? And, to survive on this island, he had to do amazing things over a period of 5 years to survive. So, of course, he became better than he was, and the best you can be. But this scene also shows that he had trouble fighting this guy, and this guy is a professional assassin who has been doing this his whole life. The same thing they had with Deadshot. There was problems when he fought Deadshot. The Dark Archer, Ollie has had these problems, and it's because he's only been doing this for 5, maybe 6 years now since the show's been going on, but he hasn't been doing it that long. So yes, he's impressive, and he can he can do these great feats and amazing things because he has trained, but he's still new to it. And that's what I love about the writing. So I love about the show. Like I said, they keep developing these relationships, and they keep showing how Ollie's growing, not only as a person, as a character, with his skill. They show how he's not perfect. He makes flawed decisions. He gets his butt kicked, but he keeps going, and that's just awesome. So I always make my calls about that, and I had to call today because I was so excited about Green Arrow, and I was just so pumped. And I know I had a bumming call a couple of times ago, so I wanted to bring something to the table that I was truly, truly excited for, and this episode of Arrow did it. So, guys, if nobody has jumped on this episode yet, y'all listeners, go jump on this show. It's so awesome. Anyway, Great time listening to the show. Take it easy.
Arrow is a fantastic show, and a lot of what you and your girl are talking about is exactly what I love about it. To me, Ollie has always been one of those characters that is insanely cool because you question his morality, because he's so emotionally driven. And he's always a character that tends to make mistakes due to emotion. Sometimes it's the wrong kinds of emotions that get him into traps, but I could see this episode in particular you're talking about where there's powerful arguments on both sides of it. And I don't know how I'd react in that situation. That's one of the great things about, I love when you've got a great comic book driven show where people who are writing it really understand the character. Ollie at his core is a very human character. He tries to do the right thing. He does make mistakes along the way. Was this a mistake? That's debatable, and you're posing an interesting debate there. I don't know if you call it a mistake or not. And I'll be honest, for me, it depends on the day. That's one of the great things about the supporting cast on this show, too. There's an emotional resonance with the entire supporting cast. So you can't help but question whether or not he's doing the right thing because you care about all of the people involved. This is a really terrific show. The writing is top-notch. It's not dumbed down. It's very strong comic book. It's great television drama. It just plays out really, really well, which is proof that there's a lot of DC properties that can make it if they're understood, handled correctly, embrace what makes them great, and they just get them out there on the screen. I don't know how long the development process on this show took, but whatever they did was absolutely perfect. This is easily one of my favorite shows on television right now. And I say that in an era where we're getting amazing shows, like things like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. Doctor Who, I think, is at an all-time high. I'm really into this show, The Following. There's like a whole bunch of stuff out there that I think is just being really well written. Walking Dead, things like that. It's a good time to be a geek culture fan. And there's more and more of these great, well-written, story-driven shows. And Arrow's competing with, I think, some just top-quality programming, Person of Interest, stuff like that I'm really digging. And Arrow just, week after week, is hitting a home run. And this is one of those shows I see myself watching again and again and again, going back and enjoying, even a few years after the show's, when it eventually ends, going back and going through and just enjoying the whole thing again just because you can. And, there's shows that are on the short list like that, and Arrow's going to be one of those, I think. And I just, the series has got amazing momentum, it's got a great cast, and amazing writing. And that's really a key. It's the perfect package. So I'm glad you called in about it, and you guys are really enjoying it. And the one voicemail where you said it was kind of a bumper voicemail, I completely disagree. I think it was an honest voicemail where you're coming from a standpoint of something that was bothering you. And one of the cool things about this show, and I always want people to feel comfortable with that, send in things that you want to debate about, you want us to talk about, or thoughts that you want to share. I want this to be an outlet. I consider this a community, especially voicemails. That's why we open them up. I air every voicemail that has ever been sent into the show. I feel it's an audio medium, and it's a chance for you guys to be on the show talking about things that you find that are interesting. I'll share my opinion on it, and, we may agree, we may disagree, and that doesn't matter. Callers like Brandon are exactly why I love our show voicemail line. Over the years, we've really enjoyed a great community of people who have called in. I've genuinely enjoyed all the calls. Remember, our show voicemail line is 1-440-388-4434 or drnorge on Skype. We welcome any phone calls. If you got something you want to talk about that's DC Comics related and you just want to get your thoughts out there, please go ahead and do it.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, that Batman Court of Owls book and mask set, I'm eyeing that one. That's Scott Snyder artwork, Greg Capello on pencils, Jonathan Glapian. It's just a great creative team. It's a great, exciting series. And anytime when you can grab a mask from something like that, I mean, that's really cool. A PVC mask is going to make a great display piece. This is $24.99 regularly, 50% off only $12.49. And remember to shop, do all your digital purchasing right from our sponsor, DCB Service, as well. Over at InStockTrades.com, 45% off sale going on for DC Comics. And remember, there's a ton of stuff available for 50% off, too. It's a great opportunity to really really grab some very cool trade paperbacks. It's not just DC Comics, though. If you're a fan of Across Comics, there's all kinds of great trade paperbacks and hardcover collections. To me, sites like InStockTrades.com keep me reading new and exciting things, because when it's outside of the show for me, I have to really pick and choose because of time, like what books that I'm reading. So I'll sometimes grab 2 or 3 hardcovers or trades in a series that I've really been wanting to catch up on and really enjoying sitting down and reading those back to back. And a site like InStockTrades.com makes that affordable in a market where you've got so many cool storylines going on. I really think that we're in an amazing time as comic fans, and it is sites like that that keep us reading more. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for providing great service and amazing discounts, and also for sponsoring podcasts. I want to remind everyone about our show website, RagingBullets.com. I always update with information about the show, and I want to get back into, and it's one of my plans, one of my resolutions this summer, is to get back into putting an article up on the site regularly. And if anybody has any interest, this is a no-pressure kind of thing, if anybody has an interest in blogging or wants to be associated with the show on that level, we used to have articles running on the show website, and they really were articles that were put together by fans of the show, friends of the show, who've wanted to just get the word out and wanted to be associated with the show in that fashion. If anybody is interested in that and wants to blog or wants their own article or wants to even, just post something up on the website, I've always considered the show to be community-based. It's one of the reasons why I love our Facebook group, because it's so community-based. It doesn't have to be just DC. If there's something you want to blog about or things like that and get the word out, please let me know, and I would love to certainly host that up on the website if you're interested. If you have your own blog, so forget posting it on our site, if you have your own blog and you want to get the word out about it, please let me know, or podcasts or things like that. A lot of times I rely on word of mouth. I rely on listeners letting me know when they got something going on, so that way I can make sure not only to check it out myself, but also to make sure our listening audience is made aware of it. So please feel free to post it on our Facebook group, Google+, different things like that, Facebook, Twitter, things, those kinds of shout-outs are great. Don't be afraid to email me, though. It's ragingbullets@me.com, and I love to support any of our friends in the listening community or podcasting community or wherever. Any of your endeavors that you're doing, we want the show to be an outlet for that. So thank you so much for the support of our podcast. Our next episode, Dark Knight Returns. I've been always wanting to. I don't know what it took us so long to get to this. I think what's happened was as anniversaries have come up on the show and chances to do big stories, a lot of times we've favored ones that, like, you haven't read. Like Long Halloween. I didn't anticipate Long Halloween coming before we did this one. But I think there was something interesting about a 12-part, or it was more than that, actually. Didn't we figure out it was like 14 parts when you consider the double issues or something? There was something epic about doing that. And you not having ever read it all, there was something attractive about that. This time around, I think we were long overdue to finally hit these. So we're going to do with Dark Knight Returns is what we just did with Year One. We're going to be taking an in-depth look at the 2-part animated feature. And our goal is in 351 to try and get it in one show. I don't know how that's going to play out. The discussion will ultimately decide that, because this is a lot of material and 2 parts to a film. So we may be doing something similar to 351 that we just did with this in order to give it the kind of coverage it deserves. But I think it's one of those big epics. And then we'll wrap up this cycle with The Dark Knight Strikes Again, which is the one that you've never read, Jim, which I think will be fun to discuss. That's kind of a cool way to wrap it all up. Then we go back to regular current comics.
And I think Vegas is running odds right now that 30-1 that we get it done in one. So, everyone's leaning towards it's getting done in 2.
Well, yeah, it's the discussion, like, we didn't think Year One would be broken up into 2 parts, and it just kind of... So we'll let the discussion make the decision versus making a plan for that, because I think that's always... The podcast and the audience is always better served when the discussion drives it versus being pigeonholed into, like, having, 1 part or 2 parts based on what we think it should be. So we'll let that decide. But I hope you guys were really enjoying this. We haven't had a chance in a while to do something classic where it's big and epic like this. And I think it's good every so often to take a break from the current material, to take a look at something classic, and then to jump heavy. I think it builds kind of, I don't know, you get the same way I do, Jim. It builds kind of an anticipation for us to start talking about all these cool books that have been released while we were doing the classic material, too. So, hope you guys are enjoying this one. We will see you next week.
Bye!
space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sidelines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. Talking about Hawkman.